The night Cole Bennett won a woman at auction, he thought he'd won a game. When she removed her wig in the lamplight of his ranch house, revealing burn scars that mapped tragedy across her skin, he realized he'd lost something far more valuable: his own humanity. What started as a $300 bet between drunk ranchers in a forgotten Wyoming town became the reckoning Cole never saw coming. This is the story of a wager that cost everything, and the woman who made a fool pay the price of becoming a man. Before we begin, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's ride. The wind came hard across the Wyoming plains that October afternoon, carrying dust and the smell of cattle and men who'd been working too long under an unforgiving sun. Black Hollow wasn't much of a town. A main street with a saloon, a general store, a church nobody attended except for funerals, and an auction house that saw more action than the Sunday service ever would. It was the kind of place where a man's word meant something only as long as his fists or his wallet could back it up, and where women learned early to keep their eyes down and their opinions quieter. Cole Bennett didn't keep anything quiet. He sat astride his roan gelding at the edge of the crowd, hat pulled low against the glare, watching the chaos unfold outside the auction house with the detached amusement of a man who owned half the county and felt accountable to none of it. At 34, Cole had built the Iron Ridge Ranch into an empire of cattle and water rights, carved out of land that had broken lesser men. He had money, land, and a reputation that preceded him into every room, cold, calculating, and completely unburdened by sentimentality. The auction was in full swing: furniture, livestock, farm equipment, the remnants of families who couldn't hold on through another drought or debt. Cole had seen it 100 times. He usually didn't bother attending these spectacles, but his foreman had mentioned a good plow horse might be on the block, and Cole never turned down an opportunity to expand his holdings. What he hadn't expected was her. She stood apart from the crowd, a figure in black so complete it seemed to absorb the sunlight. Full mourning dress, veil so thick her face was nothing but shadow, gloves that covered her hands to the wrist. Even her shoes were black. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't acknowledge the stares and whispers that followed her like flies on a carcass. "That's the Shaw widow," someone muttered nearby. "Evelyn Shaw. Husband and kid died in a fire up near Redemption Ridge 6 months back. Burned the whole homestead to nothing. Why's she here? Debts. Bank took everything. Now she's got nothing but what she's wearing." Cole's eyes narrowed. There was something unsettling about her stillness, the way she stood like a statue while chaos swirled around her. Mourning was one thing. Every woman in the territory had buried someone. But this felt different. This felt like a woman who'd buried herself along with the dead. "Gentlemen, ladies!" The auctioneer, a weasel-faced man named Pritchard, climbed onto the platform with the enthusiasm of a carnival barker. "We've got a special item today. Not often we auction off a woman, but times being what they are, and Christian charity being what it is, we're offering the opportunity for a good man to provide for a widow in need." Cole's jaw tightened. He'd heard of these arrangements before: desperate women, destitute and alone, essentially sold to the highest bidder under the guise of protection or employment. It was legal, barely, and it left a taste in his mouth like spoiled meat. "Now, Mrs. Shaw here is a respectable woman," Pritchard continued, gesturing toward the veiled figure. "Good Christian upbringing, knows her way around a kitchen and a household. Any man willing to take on the responsibility of her care will be doing the Lord's work." The crowd murmured. Some of the men leaned forward with interest. Others looked away, uncomfortable with the whole affair. Cole should have ridden away right then. Instead, he stayed. "What's the matter, Bennett?" The voice cut through the crowd like a blade. "Too rich to care about charity cases?" Cole didn't have to turn to know who was speaking. Dalton Reeves, a rancher who owned land adjacent to Iron Ridge, and who'd been nursing a grudge ever since Cole outbid him for water rights 2 years prior. Reeves was everything Cole despised: loud, cruel, and stupid enough to mistake meanness for strength. "Just wondering what kind of man buys a woman like she's livestock," Cole replied evenly, still not looking at Reeves. "The kind who isn't afraid of a little damaged goods," Reeves shot back, and his companions laughed, the ugly brain laughter of men who enjoyed cruelty as entertainment. Cole's hands tightened on the reins. He should have ridden away. He should have let Reeves run his mouth and forgotten the whole thing by dinner. But Reeves wasn't done. Tell you what, Bennett, I'll make you a wager. $300 says you can't make that widow remove her veil before sunrise. Everyone knows she won't show her face, not for love or money. But you're supposed to be so clever, so persuasive. Prove it. Make her show what's under all that black cloth, and I'll pay you $300. You fail, and you pay me. The crowd went silent. Even the auctioneer stopped mid-sentence. Cole should have said no. $300 was nothing to him. Pocket change. The bet itself was crude, demeaning to everyone involved. It was exactly the kind of thing he'd expect from Reeves, and exactly the kind of thing he should be above. But pride is a poison that works fast. 400, Cole said quietly. Reeves blinked. What? If I win, you pay me 400, and you publicly apologize to the lady for your disrespect. A slow, ugly smile spread across Reeves' face. Done. But when you lose, Bennett, I want you to admit in front of this whole town that you're not as smart as you think you are. Cole dismounted in one smooth motion, handing the reins to a nearby boy. He walked through this crowd with the confidence of a man who'd never lost a wager, never backed down from a challenge, never questioned whether his pride might cost more than money. I'll take her, he announced, looking directly at Pritchard. The auctioneer's eyes widened. Sir, there are proper procedures. I'll pay $1,000 cash right now. That's more than you'd get from an hour of bidding, and we both know it. Pritchard's greed won out over protocol, as Cole knew it would. Sold. To Mr. Cole Bennett of Iron Ridge Ranch. Cole pulled a roll of bills from his pocket and counted them out with deliberate precision. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Reeves was grinning like a cat with a cornered mouse. And the widow, Evelyn Shaw, stood perfectly still, betraying no reaction whatsoever. When the transaction was complete, Cole approached her. Up close, he could see the quality of her mourning dress. Expensive once, now worn and dusty from travel. Her hands, folded in front of her, were steady. Mrs. Shaw, he said quietly, tipping his hat, I have a wagon. I'll take you to my ranch. You'll have a room, meals, and employment if you're willing. This isn't what it looks like. She didn't respond immediately. Then, in a voice so soft he almost missed it beneath the wind, Isn't it exactly what it looks like, Mr. Bennett? The words hit harder than any accusation. Ma'am, I heard the wager, she continued, still not moving. Every word. I may be desperate, Mr. Bennett, but I'm not deaf. Shame, hot and unfamiliar, crawled up Cole's spine. I apologize. That was ungentlemanly. That was cruel. She turned her head slightly, though he still couldn't see her face through the veil. But I suppose cruelty is in fashion these days. Very well, Mr. Bennett. I'll go with you. I have nowhere else to go. But understand this. I am not a prize to be won. I am not livestock. I am a human being who has lost everything, and if you've bought me thinking I'll be grateful for your charity, you're about to be very disappointed. The steel in her voice caught him off guard. This wasn't a broken woman. This was a woman who'd been bent by tragedy and come back harder. Fair enough, Cole said. The wagon's this way. He offered his arm. She ignored it, walking past him with her head high, black skirt swirling around her ankles. Reeves called out from the crowd, Clock's ticking, Bennett. You've got until sunrise. Cole didn't respond. He followed Evelyn to the wagon, helped her up despite her clear preference to manage herself, and took his seat beside her. The crowd parted as they drove through, some people staring, others looking away in embarrassment. As they left Black Hollow behind, the weight of what he'd done settled over Cole like a wet blanket. He'd bought a human being to win a bet. The fact that he'd framed it as charity didn't change the fundamental ugliness of it. The wagon rattled over the rough road. The sun was already sinking toward the horizon, painting the plains in shades of amber and copper. Iron Ridge was 2 hours away, plenty of time to sit with his own stupidity. Evelyn sat perfectly still beside him, hands folded in her lap, veil unmoving in the wind. She didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just existed in a silence so complete it felt like condemnation. After 30 minutes, Cole couldn't stand it anymore. I want you to know, he started, keeping his eyes on the road, that wager was made out of pride and stupidity. I don't expect you to honor it. When we get to the ranch, I'll set you up in one of the guest rooms. You can work in the household if you want. I'll pay fair wages. Or you can rest until you figure out what you want to do next. Either way, you're not obligated to me for anything beyond basic decency." Silence. Then, "Why did you accept the bet, Mr. Bennett?" The question was simple. The answer wasn't. "Because Dalton Reeves is a son of a bitch who's been looking for any excuse to humiliate me since I beat him in a land deal. Because I'm proud and stupid and I don't like losing. Because I thought I could play the game and still be the good guy." He exhaled hard. "Turns out, I was wrong." "At least you're honest about your dishonesty," Evelyn said. "That's more than most men manage." "Doesn't make it right." "No, it doesn't." They rode in silence for another mile. The ranch was starting to come into view. The main house, the bunkhouse, the barns and corrals spreading across the valley like a small kingdom. Cole had built all of it from nothing, and usually the sight filled him with pride. Tonight, it just felt empty. "What happened to your family?" The question left his mouth before he could stop it. "I'm sorry, that's not my business." "No, it's not," Evelyn agreed. "But since you've already purchased the right to my presence, I suppose you've earned some portion of my story." The bitterness in her voice was knife-sharp. 6 months ago, my husband Thomas and I lived on a homestead near Redemption Ridge. We had a son, Samuel. He was 4 years old. Thomas was a good man, worked hard, loved us, tried to build something that would last. Her voice remained steady, clinical, as if reciting someone else's tragedy. One night in April, a lamp fell. The house was old, dry wood. Fire spread faster than we could react. Thomas got me out, then went back for Samuel. The roof collapsed before he reached him. Cole's hands tightened on the reins. "I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry," Evelyn said. "Sorry doesn't rebuild a house. Sorry doesn't bring back the dead. Sorry doesn't pay the bank when they come calling for debts you can't pay because your husband is ashes and your son is bones and everything you owned burned to nothing." The words were brutal in their honesty. "I spent 3 weeks in a doctor's office recovering from the burns," she continued. "When I was well enough to leave, I went back to the homestead. There was nothing left, just scorched earth and memories. The bank took the land. I had nothing, no family, no money, no home. So I came to Black Hollow because I heard they might have work. Instead, I found an auction block and men like Dalton Reeves making jokes about damaged goods." Cole felt sick. "Mrs. Shaw, don't." Her voice cut him off. "Don't apologize again. Don't tell me it will get better. Don't offer me comfort you don't mean. You wanted to win a bet. I needed a roof over my head. We're both getting what we wanted, aren't we?" "This isn't what I wanted," Cole said quietly. "Then you should have thought of that before you opened your wallet." They reached Iron Ridge as the last light bled from the sky. The ranch house stood solid and imposing, 2 stories of timber and stone, built to last through Wyoming winters, and the kind of loneliness that came with owning too much land. Cole's foreman, a weathered man named Jack Farrow, came out to meet them. His eyes widened when he saw Evelyn. "Boss?" "Jack, this is Mrs. Evelyn Shaw. She'll be staying with us. Set her up in the east guest room, the one with the good fireplace. Make sure she has everything she needs." Jack was smart enough not to ask questions in front of company. "Yes, sir." "Ma'am, if you'll follow me." Evelyn climbed down from the wagon without assistance, her movements careful but dignified. She paused, turning back to Cole. "Mr. Bennett, before I go inside, I want to make something clear. You made a wager that I would remove my veil before sunrise. I won't. Not for money, not for pride, not for any reason a man like you could understand. You're going to lose your bet, and you're going to lose it because you treated a human being like a gambling chip. I hope the lesson is worth $400. She walked into the house, following Jack, her black dress disappearing into the shadows. Cole stood alone in the yard, the weight of his own arrogance crushing down on him like a physical thing. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes howled. He deserved worse. Inside the house, Jack showed Evelyn to her room with the awkward courtesy of a man who had no idea how to handle the situation. "There's water in the pitcher, ma'am. Towels in the chest. If you need anything, just ring the bell and someone will come." "Thank you," Evelyn said. Jack hesitated at the door. Ma'am, if you don't mind me saying, the boss isn't usually... He's not a bad man. He just makes bad choices sometimes. Don't we all? Evelyn replied. When she was alone, Evelyn locked the door and leaned against it, finally allowing her shoulders to sag. The room was comfortable, far more comfortable than anywhere she'd slept in months. A real bed with clean linens, a fireplace, windows with glass that wasn't cracked. It felt like a cage wrapped in velvet. She moved to the mirror above the washstand, staring at her veiled reflection. Slowly, with hands that had learned steadiness through necessity, she reached up and unpinned the veil. The fabric fell away. The woman in the mirror looked back with eyes that had seen too much. The left side of her face was unmarked. The face she'd worn her whole life. Unremarkable, but her own. The right side told a different story. Burn scars rippled across her cheek and jaw, pulling her skin tight, distorting the corner of her mouth. Her ear on that side was partially melted, a stub of cartilage where a whole ear should have been. She pulled off her gloves. Her hands bore the same marks, the left mostly whole, the right scarred and stiff. Then, with the same clinical precision, she removed the wig. Underneath, her hair was growing back in patches, some areas thick, others bare scalp marked by scar tissue. It had been beautiful once, long and dark. Now it was a map of everything she'd lost. This was what Cole Bennett had bought for $1,000. This was what Dalton Reeves had wagered $400 she'd never show anyone. Evelyn replaced the wig, repinned the veil, and pulled her gloves back on with steady fingers. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself exactly 3 minutes of tears, the ration she'd given herself every night since the fire. When the 3 minutes ended, she wiped her face, stood, and began planning her next move. She would stay at Iron Ridge long enough to save money for passage somewhere else, Denver maybe, or California, somewhere no one knew her name or her story, somewhere she could disappear into the anonymity of cities and crowds. She would not remove her veil for Cole Bennett. She would not give these men the satisfaction of seeing what the fire had made of her. And she would survive, because survival was all she had left. Downstairs, Cole sat in his study with a bottle of whiskey he wasn't drinking. Jack had come and gone, reporting that Mrs. Shaw was settled and had asked not to be disturbed. The clock on the mantel ticked toward midnight. He had roughly 6 hours until sunrise. 6 hours until he'd have to walk into Black Hollow, find Dalton Reeves, and hand over $400 while admitting he'd failed. The money didn't matter. The humiliation would sting for about a day. What bothered him was something else entirely. He'd looked into Evelyn Shaw's eyes, or where her eyes should be beneath that veil, and seen something he recognized from his own mirror. A person who'd built walls so high they'd forgotten what it was like to be touched by sunlight. Cole had built Iron Ridge with his own hands and other men's sweat. He'd clawed his way up from nothing, learning early that sentiment was weakness and compassion was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. His father had drunk himself to death when Cole was 16, leaving nothing but debt and shame. His mother had followed a year later, her heart giving out from exhaustion and disappointment. Cole had promised himself he'd never be weak like them. He'd never let emotion rule his decisions. He'd never be vulnerable to the kind of pain that came from caring too much about the wrong things. It had worked. He was rich, powerful, respected, or at least feared, which amounted to the same thing in Wyoming territory. It had also left him sitting alone in a house too big for one person, drinking whiskey he didn't want, contemplating the wreckage of a wager that had seemed like nothing 6 hours ago and felt like everything now. A knock at the study door interrupted his brooding. "Come in." Jack entered, hat in hand. "Boss, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but what exactly are you planning with that woman upstairs?" "I'm planning to lose a bet and pay Dalton Reeves $400, Cole said flatly. Jack's eyebrows rose. "That's it? You bought her just to lose money?" "I bought her because I'm an arrogant fool who can't walk away from a challenge. Now I'm going to make sure she has a safe place to stay until she's ready to leave, and I'm going to keep my distance because that's what she clearly wants." "And the bet?" "The bet was wrong from the start. I'm not going to compound the mistake by harassing her to remove her veil just so I can save face." Jack studied him for a long moment. "You know, boss, that might be the first decent thing I've heard you say in the 5 years I've worked for you." "Don't get used to it," Cole muttered. Jack grinned. "Wouldn't dream of it. Good night, boss." When he was alone again, Cole finally poured the whiskey. He downed it in one swallow, feeling the burn all the way down, and tried not to think about the woman upstairs who'd lost everything and still had more dignity than he'd ever possessed. The clock ticked on. Sunrise was coming, whether he was ready for it or not. The night stretched long and restless. Cole didn't sleep, couldn't sleep, with the weight of his own stupidity pressing down on him. Around 3 in the morning, he abandoned the pretense of trying and went out to the stables to check on the horses, a habit he'd developed years ago when insomnia struck. The barn was quiet except for the soft sounds of animals settling in for the night. His roan gelding, Flint, nickered softly when Cole approached his stall. "Hey, boy," Cole murmured, running a hand along the horse's neck. "You think I'm an idiot too, don't you?" Flint huffed, which Cole chose to interpret as agreement. "Yeah, that's what I thought." He was so absorbed in his own thoughts that he didn't hear the footsteps until a voice spoke from the barn entrance. "Couldn't sleep either?" Cole spun around. Evelyn stood in the doorway, still fully dressed in her morning clothes, veil in place. The lamp she carried cast her shadow long across the barn floor. "Mrs. Shaw, I didn't expect— you should be resting." "I've learned that sleep doesn't come easily anymore," she said, moving further into the barn. "The silence is too loud. Does that make sense?" It made perfect sense, but Cole just nodded. Evelyn approached slowly, stopping several feet away, maintaining careful distance. "You have beautiful horses." "Thank you. I breed them, along with the cattle. Flint here is my personal mount, temperamental as hell, but loyal once he decides you're worth his time." "Sounds like someone I know," Evelyn said, and Cole couldn't tell if she was referring to him or herself. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, two people who'd been thrown together by circumstance and cruelty, neither quite sure what to say. Finally, Evelyn spoke. "Mr. Bennett, I want to make you an offer." Cole's guard went up immediately. "What kind of offer?" "I heard what you told your foreman about losing the bet and not pressuring me to remove my veil. That was unexpected. It doesn't make what you did right, but it shows some capacity for conscience." She paused. "So here's my offer. I'll show you what's under the veil, right now. You'll win your bet, collect your money from Mr. Reeves, and I'll have a clear conscience knowing I've repaid the roof over my head." "No." The word came out harder than Cole intended. Evelyn's head tilted. "No? No? I don't want you to show me. I don't deserve it, and you don't owe me anything. The bet was wrong, Mrs. Shaw. I'm not going to profit from it, not even if you're willing. But you'll lose $400. I can afford it." "And your pride?" "My pride is what got us both into this mess," Cole said quietly. "Maybe it's time I learned to swallow it." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. Then, to Cole's shock, she laughed, a short, bitter sound devoid of humor. "You really are an unusual man, Mr. Bennett. Most men I've known would have taken the offer without hesitation. They'd have rationalized it as my choice, my agency, and never mind the circumstances that forced the choice in the first place." "I'd like to think I'm better than that," Cole said, "though today's evidence suggests otherwise." "Today's evidence suggests you're human," Evelyn corrected, "which is more than I expected from a man who buys women at auction." The words stung, but Cole accepted them. "Fair enough." Evelyn moved closer to Flint's stall, extending a gloved hand toward the horse. Flint, who bit anyone he didn't like, lowered his head and allowed her to stroke his nose. "I'm going to tell you something, Mr. Bennett, and I want you to listen carefully." "I'm listening." "I don't trust you. I don't particularly like you. And I think what you did today was cruel and selfish and everything wrong with men who have too much money and not enough sense." She continued stroking Flint's nose, her voice steady. "But I also recognize that you could have made this much worse. You could have treated me like property you'd purchased. You could have demanded I honor the wager. You could have locked me in that room upstairs and told yourself it was for my own good. You didn't. So while I don't trust you, I'm willing to give you the opportunity to prove you're not completely irredeemable." "That's generous of you," Cole said, and meant it. "No, it's practical. I need a place to stay, and you need to assuage your guilty conscience. We can help each other, provided we're both honest about what this arrangement is." "And what is it?" "Employment. Nothing more, nothing less. I'll work in your household, cooking, cleaning, whatever needs doing. You'll pay me fair wages and keep your distance. When I've saved enough to leave, I'll go. Until then, we maintain a professional relationship built on mutual necessity and carefully managed distrust. Cole considered this. It was more than he deserved, and probably less than she should demand. But it was honest, which was more than could be said for most arrangements. Agreed, he said, extending his hand. Evelyn looked at his hand for a long moment, then reached out and shook it. Her grip was firm, even through the glove. One more thing, she added. Tomorrow, when you go to pay Mr. Reeves, I want to come with you. Cole frowned. Why? Because I want him to see that his cruelty didn't break me. I want him to know that whatever satisfaction he thinks he got from that wager, it won't last. I want to look him in the eye, or as close as I can through this veil, and show him that I'm still standing. There was steel in her voice that Cole was beginning to realize ran right through to her core. This was not a woman who'd been defeated by tragedy. This was a woman who'd been forged in fire, literally, and come out harder for it. All right, Cole agreed. We'll ride into town together at sunrise. Good. Evelyn turned to leave, then paused at the barn door. And Mr. Bennett? Thank you for not pressuring me tonight. It doesn't erase what you did, but it's a start toward making it slightly less terrible. I'll take slightly less terrible, Cole said. She disappeared into the darkness, taking her lamp with her, leaving Cole alone with the horses and the growing realization that Evelyn Shaw was going to be far more than he'd bargained for, in every possible way. Dawn broke cold and clear across Iron Ridge. Cole was already up and dressed, having given up on sleep entirely around 4 in the morning. He'd spent the remaining hours preparing for the ride into town and contemplating the various ways this day could go wrong. Evelyn emerged from the house exactly at sunrise, dressed in the same black morning clothes, veil and gloves firmly in place. Her spine was straight, her movements precise. If she was nervous about facing Reeves and the town, she showed no sign of it. Ready? Cole asked, bringing her horse around. A gentle mare named Patience. As I'll ever be, Evelyn replied. They rode in silence, the morning air crisp with the promise of autumn. The plains stretched endlessly in every direction, golden grass rippling like waves under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. In another context, it might have been beautiful. As they approached Black Hollow, Cole could see a crowd gathering near the saloon. Word had spread fast. It always did in small towns where entertainment was scarce and other people's business was the primary currency. Dalton Reeves stood in the center of it all, already drinking despite the early hour, surrounded by his usual pack of yes-men and sycophants. Well, well, Reeves called out as Cole and Evelyn dismounted. Look who's come to settle accounts. Tell me, Bennett, did you win our little wager, or are you here to pay up? Cole helped Evelyn down from her horse, acutely aware of the dozens of eyes watching every movement. I'm here to pay, Cole said evenly. You won the bet, Reeves. Congratulations. A cheer went up from Reeves's companions. Money started changing hands as side bets were settled. Cole pulled $400 from his pocket and counted it out, each bill a small surrender of pride. Reeves snatched the money with greedy fingers, grinning like a wolf. I knew it. Bennett, the great rancher, the man who never loses, finally brought down by a widow in a veil. How's it feel knowing you couldn't make her show her face? It feels like I learned an important lesson about making bets on other people's dignity, Cole said quietly. The crowd noise died down a bit. That wasn't the response they'd expected. And what lesson is that? Reeves pressed, sensing he was losing the crowd's attention. Before Cole could answer, Evelyn stepped forward. The lesson, Mr. Reeves, is that my face is not a prize to be won. My body is not an object to be purchased. My dignity is not something that can be wagered or sold, no matter how desperate my circumstances. Her voice rang out clear and strong across the silent street. Mr. Bennett made a terrible mistake accepting your bet, but at least he had the decency to recognize it as a mistake. You, on the other hand, made that wager because you enjoy cruelty. You enjoy reducing human beings to entertainment, and you think your $400 buys you the right to humiliate me. Reeves's smile faltered. Now, see here. No, you see here, Evelyn continued, taking another step forward. You wanted me to remove my veil? You wanted to see what the fire left behind? Fine, I'll show you. Evelyn, don't, Cole started, but she held up a hand to stop him. It's my choice, Mr. Bennett. With steady hands, she reached up and unpinned her veil. The fabric fell away. The crowd gasped. Cole's breath caught in his throat. The burn scars mapped the right side of her face in ripples of tissue, pulling her skin tight, distorting what had once been beautiful into something stark and real and undeniably human. But it was her eyes that held everyone frozen. Dark, steady, unflinching, looking directly at Dalton Reeves with a gaze that could have cut glass. This is what you wanted to see, she said quietly. This is what you bet $400 on. A woman who lost her husband, her child, and half her face to fire. Are you satisfied? Did it entertain you? Reeves had gone pale. The crowd was dead silent. Evelyn reached up and removed her wig, revealing the patchy regrowth underneath, the bare scalp marked with scars. This is what a real tragedy looks like, Mr. Reeves. Not a gambling chip, not a curiosity. A woman who survived something that should have killed her and kept going anyway. She stepped closer to him, her ruined face inches from his. Now that you've seen it, tell me, was it worth $400? Reeves couldn't speak. He stumbled backward, nearly falling over his own feet. Someone in the crowd started to applaud. Then another. Within moments, the whole street was clapping. Not mockery, but genuine respect. Women wiped tears from their eyes. Men who'd been laughing moments before now looked ashamed. Evelyn turned to face them all, her scarred face revealed, her dignity intact. I am Evelyn Shaw, she announced. I was a wife and a mother. I survived a fire that took everything I loved. I am scarred and burned and broken in ways that will never heal, but I am not ashamed. I am not a curiosity, and I am not defeated. Remember that next time you're tempted to make someone else's pain into your entertainment. She replaced her wig with calm precision, then her veil, covering herself once more. Then she turned to Cole. I'm ready to go home now, Mr. Bennett. Home. The word struck Cole like a physical blow. Yes, ma'am, he managed. They rode out of Black Hollow in silence, leaving Dalton Reeves standing alone in the street, $400 in his hand feeling heavier than gold, and the applause ringing in their ears like absolution neither of them had earned but both desperately needed. The ride back to Iron Ridge felt longer than the journey out, though the distance hadn't changed. Cole kept stealing glances at Evelyn, who sat straight-backed in her saddle, veil once again concealing the face she'd revealed to the entire town. She hadn't spoken since they'd left Black Hollow, and the silence between them had shifted into something different. Not comfortable exactly, but no longer hostile. You didn't have to do that, Cole finally said as the ranch came into view across the valley. Do what? Show them. Show Reeves. That was more than anyone deserved, especially after you bought me at auction? Evelyn's voice held no anger, just a flat statement of fact. You're right. They didn't deserve it. But I needed them to see. I needed them to understand that hiding isn't the same as shame. I wear this veil because I choose to, not because I'm afraid of their judgment. Cole nodded slowly, absorbing this. For what it's worth, I think you're the bravest person I've ever met. Bravery is just fear that's learned to function, Evelyn replied. Don't mistake survival for courage, Mr. Bennett. I do what I must because the alternative is giving up, and I'm too stubborn to die. They rode through the gates of Iron Ridge as the morning sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the dawn chill. Ranch hands working in the corrals stopped to stare, word having clearly spread faster than horses could ride. Jack Farrow emerged from the barn, his weathered face carefully neutral. Boss? Ma'am. He tipped his hat. Everything go all right in town? As well as could be expected, Cole said, dismounting. He moved to help Evelyn down, but she was already on the ground, handing Patience's reins to a young stable hand who looked too nervous to make eye contact. Jack, can you gather everyone in the yard? I want to address the hands. Jack's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded. Yes, sir. Within minutes, the ranch hands had assembled, 15 men of varying ages, all of them looking curious and slightly apprehensive. Cole had never called a general meeting before unless someone was getting fired or there was an emergency. Cole stood on the porch steps, Evelyn beside him, and surveyed the men who worked his land. I want to introduce you all properly to Mrs. Evelyn Shaw. She'll be staying at Iron Ridge indefinitely, working in the household. I expect her to be treated with the same respect you'd show any employee here, which means no gossip, no speculation, and no rudeness. Anyone who has a problem with that can collect their pay and leave right now. The men shifted uncomfortably, but no one moved. Mrs. Shaw has been through more hardship than most of us will see in a lifetime, Cole continued. She doesn't owe any of us her story, and she doesn't owe us explanations. What she does deserve is basic human decency. Can I count on that from all of you? A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. One of the older hands, a man named Pete Garrett, who'd worked at Iron Ridge since Cole first bought the land, spoke up. You have my word, boss, and anyone who disrespects the lady answers to me. Others nodded in agreement. The young stable hand who'd taken Patience piped up in a voice that cracked with adolescence. We ain't savages, Mr. Bennett. We know how to act right. Cole felt some of the tension ease from his shoulders. Good. Get back to work then. The men dispersed, returning to their duties with the kind of sideways glances that suggested they'd be talking about this for weeks, but at least they'd do it out of earshot. Evelyn turned to Cole. Thank you. That wasn't necessary, but I appreciate it. It was absolutely necessary, Cole corrected. This is your home now, at least temporarily. You shouldn't have to worry about being harassed in your own home. That word again. Home. It seemed to catch them both off guard every time it surfaced. I should get started on breakfast, Evelyn said, changing the subject. I imagine you haven't eaten yet. You don't have to. We had an agreement, Mr. Bennett. I work, you pay me. Unless you've changed your mind. No, I just meant you've had a difficult morning. You could rest. Rest is for people who can afford to stop moving, Evelyn said. I'm not one of them. She walked into the house, leaving Cole standing alone on the porch, wondering how someone could be so fragile and so unbreakable at the same time. Inside, Evelyn made her way to the kitchen, a large, well-appointed space that clearly hadn't seen much use beyond basic meals. The cast-iron stove was clean but cold, the counters bare. This was the kitchen of a man who ate to survive, not to enjoy. She lit the stove, found flour and eggs and bacon in the larder, and set to work. Cooking had always soothed her. The precise measurements, the familiar motions, the alchemy of transforming raw ingredients into something sustaining. It was one of the few things the fire hadn't taken from her. Her hands, even scarred and stiff, remembered the movements. Kneading dough, cracking eggs, the rhythm of a knife against a cutting board. Within an hour, she'd produced a breakfast that could have fed twice the number of people in the house. Bacon, eggs, biscuits, gravy, fried potatoes. Cole appeared in the doorway just as she was plating the food, his expression somewhere between impressed and bewildered. You made all this? You have a well-stocked kitchen, and I know how to use it, Evelyn said. Sit down. Eat while it's hot. They sat across from each other at the large wooden table, an expanse of scarred oak between them. Cole took a bite of the biscuits and nearly groaned. This is incredible. It's basic cooking, Mr. Bennett. Don't act like I've performed a miracle. You don't understand. I've been eating Jack's attempts at cooking for 5 years. This might actually be a miracle. Despite herself, Evelyn felt the corner of her mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but close. They ate in silence for a while, the morning light streaming through the windows, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. It was peaceful in a way that made Evelyn's chest ache. She'd forgotten what peaceful felt like. Can I ask you something? Cole said eventually. You can ask. I may not answer. Fair enough. He set down his fork. Why did you really show them your face? And don't tell me it was just to prove a point to Reeves. I saw your eyes. There was something else. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, weighing whether this man deserved her honesty. Finally, she said, Because I'm tired of hiding. Not from shame, I meant what I said about that, but from life. I've spent 6 months behind this veil, and part of me was starting to forget that I still existed underneath it. Showing them was showing myself that I'm still here, still real, still capable of being seen. Cole absorbed this. And it terrified me, and it freed me, both at the same time. Sounds complicated. Everything is complicated when you're trying to rebuild yourself from ash, Evelyn said. She stood, beginning to clear the plates. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a house to clean. Evelyn, Mrs. Shaw, you just cooked a feast. You can take the morning off. I don't want the morning off. I want to work. I want to be useful. I want to earn my place here so that when I leave, I owe you nothing. She met his eyes through the veil. Can you understand that? Cole nodded slowly. Yes, I can. Over the following days, a routine established itself at Iron Ridge. Evelyn rose before dawn, prepared meals that the ranch hands praised with the fervor of starving men, cleaned the house with meticulous attention, and maintained the careful distance she'd negotiated with Cole. He, in turn, kept his word, paying her fair wages, respecting her boundaries, and gradually learning to navigate the strange new dynamic of having someone in his home who wasn't there by choice but wasn't exactly a prisoner either. The ranch hands, true to their word, treated Evelyn with awkward but genuine respect. Pete Garrett, the eldest among them, even started leaving his boots outside the kitchen door without being asked, muttering something about not tracking mud where a lady's trying to keep things clean. But it was in the evenings, after the work was done and the house settled into quiet, that the real transformation began. Cole had taken to sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set over his land. On the third evening, Evelyn joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Thought you might want this, she said, offering him one. Thank you. Cole took the cup, surprised. You don't have to wait on me after hours. I'm not waiting on you. I'm sharing coffee with another human being. There's a difference. She sat in the rocking chair beside his, maintaining careful distance, and they watched the sky turn from gold to rose to purple in comfortable silence. Can I ask you something? Evelyn said eventually. Turnabout's fair play, Cole replied. Why do you live out here alone? A man with your resources could have married, had a family, filled this house with life. Instead, you built an empire and sit in it by yourself. Cole was quiet for so long Evelyn thought he might not answer. Then, because I learned early that people leave. Either they die or they disappoint you, or you disappoint them. Land doesn't leave, cattle don't leave, money doesn't leave. So I built my life around things that couldn't abandon me. That's a lonely way to live, says the woman who hides her face from the world. Evelyn flinched, but didn't argue. Fair point. I'm sorry, that was cruel. No, it was honest. We're both hiding, Mr. Bennett, just in different ways. They sat in silence again, 2 damaged people learning to exist in the same space without cutting each other on their sharp edges. You know, Cole said, you could call me Cole. We're past formalities at this point. I don't think we are, Evelyn replied. Formalities are what keep this arrangement professional. The moment I start calling you Cole, it becomes something else. Would that be so terrible? Evelyn stood, taking her empty cup. Yes, because eventually I'll leave, and it's easier to leave a place when you haven't let it become home. She went inside, leaving Cole alone with the sunset and the uncomfortable realization that he didn't want her to leave at all. The first real test came a week later when Evelyn was working in the garden behind the house. The space had been neglected for years, overgrown with weeds, the soil hard and unforgiving. But Evelyn had found tools in the barn and set about reclaiming it, needing the physical labor to quiet her mind. She was on her knees, pulling weeds with her scarred hands, when she heard horses approaching. 3 riders came around the side of the house, ranch hands from a neighboring property, men she didn't recognize. Well, looky here, one of them drawled, dismounting without invitation. The famous widow. Heard about you in town. Heard you showed off your burns for the whole town to see. Evelyn stood slowly, brushing dirt from her skirt. You heard wrong. I showed my face because I chose to, not for anyone's entertainment. Same difference, ain't it? Another rider dismounted, grinning. We were thinking maybe you'd give us a private showing. We rode all the way out here, after all. Fear flickered in Evelyn's chest, but she kept her voice steady. You need to leave, now. Or what? You gonna call for Bennett? He your protector now? That how you're paying for your room and board? The crude implication made Evelyn's stomach turn, but before she could respond, a voice cut across the yard like a whip crack. You've got 3 seconds to get back on those horses. Cole stood at the corner of the house, rifle in hand, his face carved from stone. Jack Farrow and Pete Garrett flanked him, also armed. The three riders froze. "Mr. Bennett, we didn't mean no harm," the first one stammered. "We just wanted to—" "You wanted to harass a woman on my property," Cole interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. "You wanted to treat her like a curiosity, like she owes you something because she suffered. You're on my land without permission, making threats to someone under my protection. I'd say that gives me the right to shoot you for trespassing, wouldn't you, Jack?" "Letter of the law says so, boss," Jack agreed, raising his own rifle. The riders scrambled back onto their horses, nearly trampling each other in their haste. "You tell anyone who's thinking about making a similar visit," Cole called after them, "that Iron Ridge doesn't tolerate that kind of behavior. The widow is off limits, and if anyone has a problem with that, they can bring it to me directly." The riders disappeared in a cloud of dust, spurring their horses hard. Cole lowered the rifle, his hand shaking slightly with residual adrenaline. He turned to Evelyn, who stood perfectly still in the garden, her composure intact but her hands clenched into fists. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." "What I look like and what I am are two different things, Mr. Bennett." She walked past him toward the house. "Thank you for the intervention. I appreciate it." But her voice was tight, controlled, and Cole recognized it for what it was, someone holding themselves together through sheer force of will. He found her 20 minutes later in the kitchen, scrubbing the already clean counter with violent intensity. "Evelyn, I'm working. The counter's clean." "It could be cleaner." Cole gently took the rag from her hands. They were shaking. "Talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about. Some men were rude. You intervened. It's over." "It's not over. You're terrified." "I'm angry," Evelyn corrected, her voice rising. "I'm angry that I can't even work in a garden without being harassed. I'm angry that my scars have made me into a spectacle. I'm angry that I have to depend on you for protection because I'm too weak to—" "You are not weak," Cole interrupted firmly. "You are the strongest person I've ever met. What those men did was cowardice, not strength. Don't confuse their cruelty with your vulnerability." Evelyn's hands were still shaking. Without thinking, Cole reached out and took them in his own, his larger hand steady around her scarred ones. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "I promise you, Evelyn, you're safe." For a moment she let herself be held, not romantically, not even intimately, but as one damaged person offering anchor to another. Then she pulled away, rebuilding her walls with visible effort. "I need to start dinner," she said, her voice carefully neutral again. "All right," Cole agreed, stepping back. "But Evelyn, what I said stands. Anyone who wants to get to you has to go through me first, and I don't lose fights on my own land." She nodded once, then turned to the stove, and Cole knew the conversation was over. That night, unable to sleep, Cole made his way to the study and pulled out his ledger. He flipped to a blank page and began writing, not accounts or expenses, but a letter. "To the ranchers and citizens of Black Hollow and surrounding territories, let it be known that Mrs. Evelyn Shaw is under the full protection of Iron Ridge Ranch and its proprietor. Any attempts to harass, threaten, or otherwise disturb her peace will be met with immediate and severe consequences, both legal and personal. Mrs. Shaw has suffered more than most could endure and deserves to live without fear or persecution. This is not a request. This is a warning. Cole Bennett, Iron Ridge Ranch." He would have it printed and distributed throughout the county by week's end. It wouldn't stop everyone. Cruelty always found a way. But it would make clear that Iron Ridge was sanctuary. He was sealing the letter when he heard soft footsteps in the hall. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl over her nightdress, her veil still in place even at this late hour. "Can't sleep?" Cole asked. "The silence," Evelyn said, repeating what she'd told him that first night. "It's too loud." I know the feeling." She moved into the study, her eyes falling on the letter. "What's that?" Cole hesitated, then handed it to her. She read it slowly, her expression hidden behind the veil. "You don't have to do this," she said finally. "Yes, I do." "Why?" It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Cole chose honesty. "Because I brought you here. Because my pride and my stupidity put you in this position. And because somewhere between that auction and now, I started to actually care what happens to you. Not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but because you deserve better than what this world has given you, And if I can provide even a small measure of safety, then that's what I'm going to do. Evelyn set the letter down carefully. You're making it very difficult to maintain professional distance, Mr. Bennett. Good, Cole said. Maybe we both need to stop hiding behind professional distance and just be honest with each other. Honesty is dangerous. So is loneliness. They stood in the lamplight, two people circling something neither of them knew how to name. I should go back to bed, Evelyn said, but she didn't move. Or you could stay, we could talk, or sit in silence, whichever you prefer. After a long moment, Evelyn sat in the chair across from his desk. Tell me about your parents. It was the last thing Cole expected her to ask. Why? Because you said people leave. I want to understand why you believe that. So Cole told her about his father's drinking, his mother's exhaustion, the slow dissolution of a family that couldn't survive its own pain, about being 16 and suddenly responsible for everything, learning that survival meant hardness, that vulnerability meant death. When he finished, Evelyn was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry, she said finally. That must have been unbearable. I survived. Survival isn't the same as living. You taught me that. Cole looked up, startled. I taught you that? You bought a woman at auction because you couldn't back down from a bet. You nearly destroyed both our dignities because you valued pride over people. And then you spent the last 2 weeks trying to make it right, trying to be better than you were. She leaned forward slightly. If someone like you can change, can learn, can grow past their worst mistakes, then maybe I can too. Maybe survival can become living. Maybe hiding can become healing. I don't know if I'm changing, Cole admitted. I just know that having you here has made me look at myself differently, and I don't particularly like what I see. That's the first step, Evelyn said. Seeing clearly. Everything else comes after. They talked until the lamp burned low, sharing pieces of their shattered pasts, building something fragile and tentative in the space between them. When Evelyn finally returned to her room, the silence didn't seem quite so overwhelming. And when Cole eventually slept, he dreamed not of land and cattle and empire, but of a woman with a scarred face and unbreakable will, teaching him what strength really meant. The following morning brought unexpected visitors. Cole was working with Jack in the barn when one of the younger hands came running. Boss, there's a wagon coming up the road, looks like townspeople. Cole and Evelyn emerged from the house to find a delegation from Black Hollow pulling into the yard, 5 wagons carrying families, led by the local preacher, a portly man named Reverend Matthews. Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Shaw, the Reverend called, climbing down from his wagon. Might we have a word? Cole tensed, moving slightly in front of Evelyn. What's this about, Reverend? Peace, Mr. Bennett. We come with good intentions. Matthews removed his hat, addressing Evelyn directly. Mrs. Shaw, on behalf of the decent people of Black Hollow, I want to apologize. What happened at that auction was a disgrace. What Mr. Reeves did was cruel, and what our town allowed to happen was shameful. Evelyn stood very still. Go on. We've brought supplies, Matthews continued, gesturing to the wagons. Fabric, food, tools, things you might need as you rebuild your life. We can't undo what was done, but we can try to make amends. Women began climbing down from the wagons, carrying baskets and packages. Among them was the doctor's wife, a kind-faced woman named Sarah Palmer. Mrs. Shaw, Sarah said, approaching carefully. I was there that day. I didn't speak up when I should have. I let fear of judgment keep me silent, and I'm ashamed of that. I hope you can forgive us. Evelyn looked at the assembled families, then at Cole, then back at the Reverend. When she spoke, her voice was measured. I appreciate the gesture, Reverend, but bringing me charity doesn't erase what happened. Your town watched me be sold like livestock. These apologies would mean more if they'd come before I was humiliated, not after. The Reverend flinched, but nodded. You're absolutely right, Mrs. Shaw. We failed you. All I can say is that your courage in the street that morning, showing us your scars, refusing to be ashamed, it woke something in people. It made us look at ourselves and not like what we saw. We can't change the past, but we'd like to do better going forward. Pretty words, Reverend, but what happens the next time someone desperate comes to your town? What happens when it's not me standing here refusing to be broken? Then we'll remember you, Sarah Palmer interjected. We'll remember that dignity matters more than entertainment, that people aren't gambling chips. We'll be better because you showed us how. Evelyn considered this. Then, slowly, she removed her veil. The crowd gasped softly, but this time there was no mockery, no cruel staring, just quiet acknowledgement of what she'd survived. You want to make amends? Evelyn asked. Then treat the next desperate soul with kindness before they're forced to prove they deserve it. Don't wait for someone to be spectacular in their suffering. Be decent to people simply because they're people. Yes, ma'am, Reverend Matthews said solemnly. We will. The families unloaded their offerings, more than Evelyn could possibly use, but the gesture mattered more than the goods. As they prepared to leave, Sarah Palmer approached Evelyn one more time. If you ever need anything, a friend, a listener, someone who understands what it's like to lose people, I'm here. My door is always open. Evelyn nodded, replacing her veil. Thank you, Mrs. Palmer. That means more than the supplies. When the wagons had departed, Cole and Evelyn stood in the yard, surrounded by boxes and baskets. Well, Cole said, that was unexpected. People can surprise you, Evelyn replied. Sometimes they rise to the occasion when you least expect it. Is that why you showed them your face again? To give them that chance? No, I showed them because I'm tired of the veil being the only thing people see. I want them to see me, scars and all, and know that I'm still standing, still here, still human. Cole looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a widow, not a charity case, not a woman he'd bought on a bet, but someone genuinely extraordinary wrapped in ordinary tragedy. You're remarkable, he said quietly. I'm surviving, Evelyn corrected. There's a difference. No, Cole insisted. There really isn't. That afternoon, Evelyn sorted through the supplies the townspeople had brought while Cole watched from the doorway, struck by how methodically she worked, folding fabric, organizing preserved goods, making neat stacks of what could be used and what should be saved. Her movements were practiced, economical, the actions of someone who'd learned not to waste anything. You don't have to do this all at once, he said. I know, but keeping busy helps. She didn't look up from her work. Idle hands give the mind too much room to wander into places it shouldn't go. Cole understood that better than she knew. He'd built an empire on the same principle. Work until exhaustion, sleep until necessity demanded consciousness. Repeat. It kept the ghosts at bay. The fabric is good quality, Evelyn continued, running her scarred fingers across a bolt of dark blue cotton. I could make new curtains for the house. Yours are practically falling apart. You don't have to. I want to. Unless you'd prefer I didn't change anything? Cole looked around at his house, functional but Spartan, decorated with all the warmth of a military barracks. Change whatever you like. It could use a woman's touch. The words came out wrong, too familiar, and he saw Evelyn stiffen slightly. A person's touch, he corrected quickly. It could use a person's touch. Someone who actually cares what the place looks like beyond four walls and a roof. Evelyn relaxed marginally. I'll make a list of what's needed. Small changes, nothing presumptuous. Evelyn, you live here. You can be as presumptuous as you want. She finally looked up at him, her veiled face unreadable. Do I live here, Mr. Bennett? Or am I just staying temporarily until I can afford to leave? It was a fair question, and Cole didn't have a good answer. The truth was, he'd stopped thinking of her presence as temporary, somewhere around the second week, but saying that out loud felt like crossing a line neither of them had agreed to erase. I suppose that's up to you, he said finally. Then I'm staying temporarily, Evelyn replied, returning to her sorting. Best not to get confused about the arrangement. Cole felt the dismissal like a door closing, but he respected it. I'll be in the south pasture if you need anything. Jack says there's a fence section that needs repair. He left her there among the donated goods, surrounded by the charity of people trying to absolve their guilt, and wondered when exactly he'd started hoping she might never leave at all. The work on the fence took most of the afternoon. Cole threw himself into the physical labor with unusual intensity, digging posts and stringing wire until his hands ached and his shirt was soaked with sweat. Pete Garrett worked alongside him, occasionally offering observations about the work or the weather, comfortable with the silence in the way of men who'd labored together for years. "She's good for this place," Pete said eventually, hammering a post into the hard ground. Cole didn't pretend not to know who he meant. "How do you figure?" "House looks lived in for the first time since you built it. Men are eating better, standing straighter. Even you seem less like you're trying to work yourself to death." Pete straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Woman like that, survivor like that, she reminds folks what actually matters. She's not staying permanently. That what she told you, or what you're telling yourself?" Cole drove his own post into the ground with unnecessary force. "Both." Pete chuckled. "You're a smart man about most things, boss, but when it comes to people, you got about as much sense as a newborn calf." "Meaning what?" "Meaning that woman's rebuilding herself piece by piece, same as she's rebuilding your house. Question is whether you're going to help her or whether you're going to keep pretending this is just a business arrangement until she's got enough money to disappear." "It's not my place to interfere with her plans." "Didn't say interfere, said help." Pete picked up another post. "There's a difference." They worked in silence after that, but Pete's words gnawed at Cole like a persistent ache. What was he doing? Keeping Evelyn at arm's length out of respect for her boundaries, or out of fear of what might happen if those boundaries dissolved? He'd spent so many years protecting himself from attachment that he'd forgotten how to recognize when protection became prison. By the time he returned to the house, the sun was setting and his whole body hurt in the satisfying way of honest labor. He found Evelyn in the kitchen as usual, preparing dinner, but something had changed. The kitchen curtains, the ones that had been hanging in tatters when he'd left, had been replaced with new ones made from the blue fabric she'd been examining earlier. The windows seemed bigger somehow, the light softer. "You work fast," Cole observed. "I told you, idle hands are dangerous." Evelyn stirred something on the stove that smelled like heaven. "Besides, sewing is one of the few things I can still do well despite the scars. The fabric was good quality. It would have been wasteful to let it sit unused." Cole moved closer, examining her handiwork. The stitching was precise, professional, the work of someone who took pride in doing things right. "These are beautiful." "They're functional," Evelyn corrected, but he could hear the pleased note in her voice. They ate dinner in the usual spot at the kitchen table, falling into the comfortable rhythm they'd developed over the past weeks. Evelyn served pot roast with vegetables and bread that was still warm from the oven. Cole ate like a man who'd forgotten what good cooking tasted like before she'd arrived, which was essentially true. "I've been thinking," Evelyn said as they ate, "about the garden." "What about it?" "It's got good soil under all those weeds. With some work, it could produce vegetables, maybe enough to feed the ranch hands through winter, save you money on supplies from town." Cole set down his fork. "Evelyn, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to. I need a project, something that requires care and attention and produces something tangible. I need to make things grow again." Her voice dropped. "I need to prove to myself that I can still create life instead of just surviving in the aftermath of death." The raw honesty of it hit Cole square in the chest. "Then yes, absolutely yes. Use whatever resources you need. I'll have some of the hands help with the heavy work. I'd prefer to do it myself, actually. The physical labor is part of the point. At least let them help with the initial clearing. The rest you can do on your own." Evelyn considered this. "All right, that's fair." After dinner, Cole found himself once again on the porch with coffee, and once again Evelyn joined him. It had become their unspoken ritual, the quiet hour after work ended and before sleep claimed them, when the world narrowed to the porch and the sunset, and whatever truths they were willing to share. "Can I ask you something personal?" Evelyn said. "You can ask. Do you ever regret not having a family? Children?" The question caught him off guard. "I never really thought about it. Family meant pain where I came from. Why would I want to recreate that?" "Not all families are painful," Evelyn said softly. "Mine wasn't. Thomas and we were happy. Samuel was joy made flesh. Losing them destroyed me, but I wouldn't trade those years for anything. The love was worth the loss." "I don't know if I believe that." "You don't have to believe it for it to be true." Cole stared out at his land, thousands of acres of grass and cattle and success measured in dollars and deeds. I built all this thinking it would fill the empty spaces. It doesn't. It just makes the emptiness more obvious. Then maybe you built the wrong thing, Evelyn suggested. Or maybe you built the right foundation but forgot to construct the house. Is that what you're doing here? Constructing a house? I'm figuring out what's worth building, Evelyn said. The difference is, I'm not afraid of the answer anymore. They sat in silence as darkness settled over Iron Ridge like a blanket, and Cole wondered what it would be like to live without fear, not of loss or pain or vulnerability, but of the possibility that something beautiful might grow in the spaces between survival and surrender. The next morning brought trouble of a different sort. Cole was in the barn when Jack came running, his face tight with concern. "Boss, we got a problem. The creek's running low, lower than it should be this time of year." Cole followed him out to the main water source for the southern pastures. The creek that normally ran strong and clear had diminished to a trickle, barely enough to sustain the cattle grazing nearby. "Someone's diverting upstream," Cole said immediately, reading the signs. "Has to be." "Reeves?" Jack suggested. "Who else? His land sits above ours on the watershed." Cole's jaw tightened. "Son of a bitch is trying to starve us out." "What do you want to do?" Cole considered his options. He could ride up to Reeves's property and confront him directly, which would likely end in violence. He could take it to the territorial court, which would take months and cost a fortune in legal fees. Or he could find another solution. "Get some of the men," Cole said. "We're going to trace the creek upstream and see exactly what Reeves has done. If he's built an illegal dam or diversion, we'll have grounds for legal action." They rode out within the hour, Cole, Jack, Pete, and 3 other hands. The creek wound through canyon country, rocky terrain that made the going slow. After 2 hours of riding, they found what they were looking for. Reeves had constructed a crude dam across the creek, diverting most of the water onto his own property. It wasn't sophisticated engineering, just logs and rocks and determination, but it was effective enough to choke off Iron Ridge's water supply. "That bastard," Pete muttered. "That's gotta be illegal." "It is," Cole confirmed. "Water rights are protected by territorial law. He can't just redirect a natural waterway without approval." "So we tear it down?" one of the younger hands asked hopefully. "No," Cole said, though every instinct screamed to do exactly that. "We document it, we report it to the territorial office, and we do this the right way. If we destroy his dam, he can claim we're the aggressors and we lose any legal standing." Jack frowned. "Boss, that could take weeks. The cattle need water now." "Then we truck water from the north wells until this is resolved. It'll cost us time and money, but it won't cost us the law." They were taking measurements and making sketches when riders appeared on the ridge above. Reeves and 6 of his men, all armed. "Well, well," Reeves called down. "Trespassing on my land, Bennett?" "This is public waterway, Reeves. You know that as well as I do. What I want to know is what gives you the right to dam it up?" "I got rights to this water same as anyone." "You have rights to reasonable use, not to starve out your neighbors." Cole kept his voice level despite the anger burning in his chest. "This dam is illegal, and you know it." "Prove it," Reeves sneered. "Take it to the territorial office. See how long that takes." "Meanwhile, your cattle die of thirst, and I buy up your land for pennies when you can't pay your debts." "That's your play? Dry me out and scoop up the pieces?" "Business is business, Bennett. You taught me that when you outbid me for those water rights 2 years ago. Turnabout's fair play." Cole's hands clenched on his reins, but he forced himself to breathe, to think. Starting a range war would get people killed and solve nothing. Reeves wanted him to react violently. That was the whole point of this provocation. "You're right," Cole said, surprising everyone, including himself. "Business is business, and I'll remember this lesson when the territorial office shuts down your dam and fines you for illegal water diversion. I'll remember it when every rancher in the county hears what you tried to do and decides they don't want to do business with a man who can't be trusted. Most of all, I'll remember it when you need a favor someday, Reeves, because that day will come. And I'll be the one deciding whether you deserve help or whether turnabout is fair play." Reeves's confident expression flickered. "You threatening me?" "No, I'm promising you consequences. There's a difference." Cole turned his horse. "Let's go, boys. We've got what we came for." They rode back to Iron Ridge in tense silence, Cole's mind already working through solutions. Jack finally spoke up as the ranch came into view. That was smart back there, boss. Not taking the bait. Smart would have been not making an enemy of Reeves in the first place, Cole replied. But yes, violence would have made things worse. What's the plan? We send our documentation to the territorial office today. Meanwhile, we rig up a water transport system from the North Wells. It'll be hard work, but it's temporary. And if Reeves tries something else while we're waiting for the law, then we deal with it without becoming the villains in our own story, Cole said firmly. When they reached the house, Evelyn was waiting in the yard, clearly having heard the riders approach. She took one look at Cole's face and knew something was wrong. What happened? Cole dismounted, suddenly exhausted despite the early hour. Reeves is trying to dry us out, built an illegal dam upstream. Can you stop him? Legally, yes, but it'll take time we don't have. Meanwhile, we're going to have to haul water from the North Wells to keep the cattle alive. Evelyn's mind was already working. He could see it in the way she straightened, her practical nature taking over. How much water? How often? A lot. Daily. It's going to mean long hours for the men. Then they'll need better meals to sustain them. Bigger portions, more protein. I can make that happen. She paused. Is there anything else I can do? Cole looked at her standing there in her black dress and veil, scarred and burned and still asking how she could help, and something in his chest shifted permanently. You're already doing more than you know, he said quietly. Over the following days, Iron Ridge transformed into a hive of coordinated effort. The men worked brutal hours hauling water, maintaining the cattle, and keeping the ranch operational despite Reeves's sabotage. Evelyn rose before dawn to prepare massive breakfasts, packed lunches that could sustain men through hard labor, and dinners that replenished what the work had drained. She also began working in the garden with fierce determination, as if coaxing life from the earth was her personal rebellion against everything that had tried to break her. Cole would watch her from a distance sometimes, on her knees in the dirt, her scarred hands gentle with seedlings, her whole body focused on the simple act of nurturing growth. On the fourth day of water hauling, one of the younger hands, a boy named Tommy, who couldn't have been more than 17, collapsed from exhaustion. Evelyn heard the commotion and came running from the house, arriving just as Pete and Jack were helping the boy into the shade. Get him inside, she ordered, her voice carrying an authority that made grown men move. Jack, fetch water, the cool water from the root cellar, not the warm. Pete, find some salt. They obeyed without question. Evelyn knelt beside Tommy, removing her gloves to press her scarred fingers against his neck, checking his pulse. Heat exhaustion, she diagnosed. He'll be all right, but he needs rest and fluids. Someone get his shirt wet. Cole watched as she worked with calm efficiency, the same steady competence she brought to everything. When Tommy's color started returning and his breathing steadied, she finally sat back. He needs at least a day of rest, she told Cole. Maybe 2. No arguments. No arguments, Cole agreed. Thank you. Don't thank me for basic human decency, Evelyn said, but her tone was softer than the words. That boy's been working himself to death trying to prove he's tough enough. Someone needed to tell him that surviving isn't about being tough. It's about knowing when to rest. She looked directly at Cole as she said it, and he understood the subtext perfectly. She wasn't just talking about Tommy. That evening, after Tommy had been settled in the bunkhouse with strict orders to sleep, Cole found Evelyn in the garden. She was planting something. He couldn't tell what in the fading light. What are you growing? He asked. Tomatoes, beans, squash, hardy things that can survive Wyoming weather. Maybe some herbs if I can keep them from freezing. She sat back on her heels. It's slow work, building something from nothing. But I'm learning patience. Cole crouched down beside her. You're good at this. At all of this. The cooking, the garden, taking care of people. Where did you learn it? From my mother, mostly. She believed idle hands invited trouble, so she kept me busy learning useful skills. Cooking, sewing, gardening, basic medicine. I fought against it when I was young, wanted to read books and dream about cities instead of learning to preserve vegetables. Evelyn's voice went soft. I wish I could thank her now. These skills are all I have left. They're more than skills, Cole said. They're how you take care of people, how you create instead of just consume. That's rare. It's survival dressed up as purpose, Evelyn corrected. Don't romanticize it. I'm not. I'm recognizing it for what it is. Strength that looks like gentleness until you realize there's nothing gentle about refusing to give up. Evelyn turned her veiled face toward him. Why are you so determined to see me as strong? It would be easier for both of us if you just accepted that I'm broken. Because you're not broken, Cole said firmly. You're rebuilt. There's a difference. Broken things fall apart. You've taken the pieces and made something new. That's not weakness, Evelyn. That's creation. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You're a strange man, Cole Bennett." It was the first time she'd used his first name, and it hit him harder than he expected. "Strange how?" he managed. "You buy a woman at auction out of pride, then spend weeks trying to atone for it. You build an empire, but live alone. You're hard as iron with everyone except when you think no one's watching, and then you're soft as new grass. You're a contradiction wrapped in certainty, and I can't figure you out." "Good," Cole said. "I can't figure you out either. Seems fair." Evelyn actually laughed, a real laugh, not bitter or hollow, but genuinely amused. The sound was so unexpected and so beautiful that Cole felt his breath catch. "We're quite a pair," she said. "Two broken people pretending to be whole." "Or two whole people finally admitting they've been broken," Cole suggested. "Is there a difference?" "I'm starting to think there might be." They stayed there in the garden as darkness fell completely. Two people learning to exist in the same space without the armor they'd worn for so long, and the silence between them felt less like distance and more like understanding. The territorial office's response came exactly when Cole didn't need another crisis. A writer arrived at noon with an official letter stating that while Reeves' dam was indeed illegal, the process to remove it would require a formal hearing that wouldn't occur for at least 6 weeks. 6 weeks. They'd be broke or broken by then. Cole was staring at the letter in his study when Evelyn knocked on the open door. "Bad news?" she asked. "The worst kind, legal news." He handed her the letter. She read it carefully. "This is ridiculous. They admit his dam is illegal but won't do anything about it for over a month?" "Bureaucracy," Cole said bitterly. "The law moves slow when you need it fast. So what do we do? Keep hauling water? Keep paying wages we can barely afford? Keep hoping the cattle don't start dying before the hearing happens?" He rubbed his face. "And pray that Reeves doesn't find another way to twist the knife." Evelyn set the letter down. "There has to be another option. If there is, I can't see it. What about talking to him? Not threatening, not fighting, just talking, finding out what he actually wants." Cole looked at her like she'd suggested flying to the moon. "Reeves wants me ruined. There's nothing to negotiate." "Maybe. Or maybe he's like you were, a man acting out of pride who hasn't been given a graceful way to back down." Evelyn moved closer. "What if someone offered him that grace? You want me to apologize to the man who's trying to destroy my ranch? I want you to be smart instead of stubborn. Pride got you into the mess with me. Don't let it destroy everything you've built here." The comparison stung because it was accurate. Cole had let pride dictate his actions once before and nearly ruined an innocent woman's life. Was he really going to make the same mistake with his ranch? "Even if I wanted to talk to him," Cole said slowly, "he'd never listen. He's been waiting years to humiliate me." "Then don't go alone," Evelyn said. "Take someone he can't dismiss as easily." "Like who?" "Like me." Cole stared at her. "Absolutely not. After what his men did, after what he said at the auction." "Exactly why it has to be me," Evelyn interrupted. "He sees me as a victim, as proof of your cruelty. What if I showed him something different? What if I proved that sometimes people can change, can make amends, can become better than their worst moment?" "You don't owe him that proof." "No, but maybe Iron Ridge does. Maybe the men who work here do. Maybe you do." She held his gaze through the veil. "I'm not asking you to grovel, Cole. I'm asking you to be strategic. Use the best weapon you have." "Which is?" "Truth, humility, the willingness to admit you've been wrong and try to do better." She paused. "The same things you've shown me." Cole felt something crack in his chest, not breaking, but opening. You'd really do this? Face the man who mocked you, who bet on your humiliation? I faced worse than Dalton Reeves, Evelyn said simply. Fire burned me. Grief tried to break me. A man's cruelty is nothing compared to those. The next morning they rode out together toward Reeves's property. Cole on flint, Evelyn on patience, both of them carrying tension like physical weight. Jack had wanted to come along as protection, but Evelyn had insisted this needed to be just the two of them. If we bring guns and backup, she'd argued, it's a threat. If it's just us, vulnerable and honest, it's an opportunity for change. Cole hoped she was right. They found Reeves in his yard, shoeing a horse. He looked up as they approached, his expression shifting from surprise to suspicion. Well, well, Bennett and his purchased widow, to what do I owe the pleasure? Cole dismounted, helping Evelyn down. We need to talk, Reeves. Not as enemies, as neighbors. We stopped being neighbors when you outbid me for water rights. You're right, Cole said, and Reeves blinked. I was ruthless in that deal. I didn't care about your position or your needs. I just cared about winning. I've spent 2 years telling myself that was just business, but that was a lie. It was pride. And I'm sorry. Reeves stared at him like he'd started speaking another language. What? I'm apologizing. For the water rights, for every time I've been cruel or dismissive, for treating you like an obstacle instead of a person. Cole took a breath. I can't undo what I did, but I can admit I was wrong. This some kind of trick? No trick, Evelyn said, stepping forward. She removed her veil in one smooth motion, revealing her scars to the bright sunlight. This is what honesty looks like, Mr. Reeves. Uncomfortable. Vulnerable. Real. Reeves looked away from her face, uncomfortable. Why are you showing me that? Because I want you to understand something. Mr. Bennett bought me at that auction because of pride and stupidity. He made a terrible mistake. But then he spent every day after that trying to make it right, giving me employment, respect, protection, becoming better than his worst action. She took another step closer. You're hurting his ranch because of old grudges. You're destroying livelihoods, not just his, but all the men who work for him, because you can't let go of being wronged. I'm asking you to be better than that, to be better than he was. Why would I do that? Because revenge is a feast that leaves you hungry, Evelyn said quietly. Because winning through cruelty means losing the man you could have been. Because I'm standing here, scarred and burned and still choosing mercy over bitterness. And if I can do that after losing everything, surely you can manage it after losing a business deal. The words hung in the air like a challenge and a plea combined. Reeves looked at Cole, then at Evelyn, then down at his hands. What exactly are you asking? Remove the dam, Cole said. Let the water flow. In return, I'll give you access to my north wells during drought years, a formal agreement that you can use that water when yours runs dry. We both win. Both survive. And if I say no, then we wait for the territorial hearing and let the law decide. But in the meantime, good men suffer, cattle die, families lose their livelihoods. And for what? So we can both prove we're too stubborn to bend? Reeves was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, That apology. Did you mean it? Every word, Cole replied. And the well access. That's a real offer, not a trick? Legally binding. We can draw up papers today. Reeves looked at Evelyn again, his eyes skittering away from her scars like they burned to look at. You really think people can change after what he did? I think people can try, Evelyn said. I think trying matters. I think we're all more than our worst moments if we're willing to do the work of being better. Reeves set down the horseshoe he'd been holding. I'll remove the dam, tomorrow, and I'll take you up on that well access, but I want it in writing. Done, Cole said, extending his hand. Reeves looked at it for a long moment, then shook it. His grip was firm, but not crushing, the handshake of a man accepting peace, not surrender. As they rode away from Reeves's property, Evelyn finally allowed herself to sag slightly in the saddle, exhaustion catching up with her. You were incredible back there, Cole said. I was honest, Evelyn corrected. There's a difference. No, Cole said, echoing her words from weeks before. There really isn't. They rode back to Iron Ridge in comfortable silence, and when the ranch came into view across the valley, his land, his home, increasingly their space, Cole felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the grim determination of survival, but actual hope that maybe, just maybe, broken things could be rebuilt into something worth keeping. That evening, the whole ranch celebrated. Word had spread about the deal with Reeves, and the men were giddy with relief that they wouldn't have to haul water anymore. Evelyn cooked a feast, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she ate with everyone in the main house instead of isolating herself. Pete raised a glass of whiskey. To Mrs. Shaw, who's got more courage in her little finger than most men have in their whole bodies. To Mrs. Shaw, the men chorused. Evelyn's cheeks colored beneath her veil, but she accepted the praise with quiet grace. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Cole found her on the porch, staring out at the stars. "You should be proud of what you did today," he said, settling into his usual chair. "I should be exhausted," Evelyn replied. "But I'm not. I feel awake, like I've been sleepwalking for 6 months and finally opened my eyes." "That's what happens when you stop just surviving and start living," Cole said. Evelyn turned to look at him. "Is that what we're doing? Living?" "I think we might be," Cole admitted. "Strange as that sounds." "It is strange," Evelyn agreed, "but not unwelcome." They sat together under the stars. Two people who'd been brought together by cruelty and circumstance, learning that sometimes the worst beginnings could lead to something worth holding on to. And neither of them said it out loud, but both of them felt it. The careful walls they'd built were starting to crumble, not from force but from choice. The change at Iron Ridge was subtle at first, like the shift from summer to autumn, imperceptible in any single moment, but undeniable when you looked back at where you'd started. Evelyn's garden began to flourish, green shoots pushing through the Wyoming soil with stubborn determination. The house took on warmth it had never possessed, curtains in every window now, flowers in mason jars on the tables. The smell of bread baking instead of just the functional silence of a place where a man slept between work shifts. Cole found himself coming back to the house earlier than he used to, inventing reasons to check on things that didn't need checking. The fence could wait another day. The books could be balanced tomorrow. Right now there was coffee on the porch, and Evelyn might join him, and that possibility had become more valuable than any task on his list. It was a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after the confrontation with Reeves, when Sarah Palmer arrived in a small buggy, her kind face bright with purpose. "Mrs. Shaw," she called as Evelyn emerged from the garden, dirt on her gloves and satisfaction in her posture. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I wanted to see how you were settling in." Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron, instinctively reaching up to check that her veil was in place. "Mrs. Palmer, this is unexpected." "Please, call me Sarah. And I apologize for arriving unannounced, but I've been thinking about what you said that day in town, about treating people with kindness before they have to prove they deserve it." Sarah climbed down from the buggy with a basket over her arm. "I brought some preserves and a book I thought you might enjoy. Poetry, mostly. I remember you mentioning you used to read." Evelyn accepted the basket, surprised by the thoughtfulness. "I don't remember mentioning that." "You didn't, not directly. But when Reverend Matthews was speaking, you quoted Shakespeare under your breath. I heard it." Sarah smiled. A fellow reader recognizes another. Despite herself, Evelyn felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "Would you like to come inside? I've just made tea." They settled in the kitchen, and for the first time since the fire, Evelyn found herself in the presence of another woman who wanted nothing from her except companionship. Sarah talked about her life in Black Hollow, the struggles of running a household on a doctor's modest income, the small rebellions of reading books her husband thought too frivolous, the loneliness of being educated in a town that valued practicality over poetry. "I envy what you're building here," Sarah said, gesturing around the kitchen. "A fresh start. The freedom to define yourself on your own terms." "It doesn't feel like freedom most days," Evelyn admitted. "It feels like I'm walking on ice, waiting for it to crack beneath me." "But you're walking. That's more than most people manage after tragedy." Sarah set down her teacup. "Evelyn, may I speak plainly? I wish you would. The whole town is talking about you and Mr. Bennett, about how you went with him to face Reeves, how you negotiated peace when he was ready to go to war. People are saying you've changed him. Evelyn's hands tightened around her cup. People should mind their own business. They should, but they won't. That's the nature of small towns. Sarah leaned forward. But what I want to know is, has he changed you? The question cut deeper than Evelyn expected. I don't know what you mean. When I first saw you at that auction, you looked like a ghost, like someone who was physically present but had already surrendered to death. Now you look angry, alive, like you're fighting for something instead of just enduring. Sarah's voice was gentle but insistent. That's not nothing, Evelyn. That's not just time passing. Something here is giving you reason to fight. Evelyn stood abruptly, moving to the window. He gave me employment, shelter, safety, that's all. Is it? It has to be. Why? Because anything else is terrifying, Evelyn wanted to say. Because I buried a husband and a child, and I swore I would never let myself care that much again. Because Cole Bennett bought me like livestock, and even though he's tried to make amends, even though he's been kinder than I expected, even though I catch myself watching him when he doesn't know I'm looking, I can't let it become more than what it is. Instead, she said, because I don't have the luxury of complicated feelings. I'm here temporarily. When I've saved enough, I'll leave. Getting attached would be foolish. Foolish, Sarah repeated, or frightening. Before Evelyn could answer, they heard horses outside. Cole returning from the north pasture with Jack. Through the window, Evelyn watched him dismount, saw the way he paused to pat Flint's neck with genuine affection, the way he laughed at something Jack said. He looked younger when he laughed, less like the hard man who'd bought her at auction and more like someone who'd forgotten how to be human and was slowly remembering. He looks at you differently, too, Sarah observed quietly. Like you're the first real thing he's seen in years. Sarah, I'm not pushing Evelyn. I'm just observing. And as someone who married for practical reasons and somehow stumbled into love anyway, I'm telling you that sometimes the most terrifying thing is also the rightest thing. She collected her basket and gloves. Thank you for the tea. I hope you'll come visit me in town sometime. It would be nice to have a friend who understands that survival and living aren't the same thing. After Sarah left, Evelyn stood in the kitchen for a long time, her hands trembling slightly. She'd been so careful to maintain distance, to keep everything professional and temporary. But the truth was creeping in like dawn, whether she wanted it or not. She was happy here. Not just safe or sheltered, but genuinely happy for the first time since the fire. And that terrified her more than any scar. That evening, Cole found her in the garden at sunset, kneeling among the tomato plants she'd staked earlier in the week. The evening light turned everything golden, and for a moment he just watched her work. The careful way her scarred hands tied twine around stems, the concentration in her posture, the stubborn life she was coaxing from reluctant earth. You missed dinner, he said finally. Evelyn startled slightly, turning. I'm sorry, I lost track of time. Don't apologize, I saved you a plate. He moved closer, crouching down beside her. These are doing well. They're stubborn. Like everything else in Wyoming, they refuse to die easy. Cole smiled. Takes one to know one. Are you calling me stubborn, Mr. Bennett? I'm calling you persistent. There's a difference. Evelyn sat back on her heels, studying him through her veil. Sarah Palmer came by today. I saw her buggy. How was that? Strange. Nice. She wants to be friends. And that's strange because I haven't had a friend in months. Because I've gotten used to isolation. Because letting people in means they can hurt you when they leave. Cole was quiet for a moment. Or when you leave. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Cole? She'd used his first name again without realizing it. I can't make promises about staying. You understand that, right? I do. And I don't expect anything, Cole interrupted gently, except honesty. That's all I've ever asked from you. Then honestly, I'm terrified. The confession came out raw. I'm terrified that I'm starting to feel safe here, that I'm starting to care about this place, about the people here, about you. And I don't know what to do with that, because the last time I let myself care about people, I watched them burn. Cole reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took one of her gloved hands in his. I can't promise you won't lose again. Nobody can. But I can promise that running from fear isn't the same as being safe from pain. It's just being alone with your fear instead of facing it with someone beside you. Evelyn looked down at their joined hands, his rough and calloused from ranch work, hers scarred and hidden beneath fabric. I don't know how to do this. How to be a person again instead of just a survivor. Neither do I, Cole admitted. But maybe we can figure it out together. She didn't pull her hand away. That felt like answer enough. The following weeks brought a rhythm to Iron Ridge that felt almost like normalcy. The garden flourished under Evelyn's care, producing tomatoes and beans that she preserved in jars lining the pantry shelves. The ranch hands grew comfortable enough with her presence to joke respectfully in her vicinity, to ask her advice on everything from mending shirts to whether a cough needed the doctor's attention. Pete Garrett started leaving wildflowers on the kitchen doorstep every few days, his gruff way of showing appreciation. Cole and Evelyn fell into patterns that looked like partnership from the outside, though neither quite dared to name it. Coffee on the porch each evening, conversations that stretched late into the night about everything and nothing, books they'd read, places they'd never been, dreams they'd abandoned and might dare to resurrect, comfortable silences that felt more intimate than words. It was during one of these silences, on an evening when autumn had truly arrived and the air carried the first real bite of coming winter, that everything shifted. They were sitting on the porch, as usual, wrapped in blankets against the chill, when Cole said, "I've been thinking about expanding the house." Evelyn looked over at him. "Why?" "It's too big for one person, but somehow too small for everything I want it to be. I was thinking about adding a proper library, maybe a room facing east to catch the morning light, good for reading or sewing or whatever needed doing. That sounds lovely." "I wanted to ask your opinion. On the design, I mean. You've got a better eye for these things than I do." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Cole, why are you asking me about permanent additions to your house when we both know I'm not staying permanently?" He turned to face her fully. "Because I'm hoping you'll change your mind." The honesty of it stole her breath. "Cole, let me finish, please." He set down his coffee cup, his hands restless. "I know how we started. I know I bought you at an auction because I was too proud and too stupid to walk away from a bet. I know I hurt you in ways I can never fully repair. But Evelyn, these last few months, having you here, it's made me realize that everything I built was just structure without warmth, land without life, success without purpose." "Don't put that on me," Evelyn said, her voice tight. "Don't make me responsible for giving your life meaning." "I'm not. I'm saying you showed me what was missing. You showed me that walls are just walls unless someone fills them with care and attention and the stubborn insistence that broken things can be rebuilt." He paused. "I'm not asking you to fix me, Evelyn. I'm asking you to stay while we both figure out how to fix ourselves." Evelyn stood abruptly, moving to the porch railing, her back to him. "You don't understand what you're asking." "Then explain it to me." "I loved my husband. I loved my son. I loved them so completely that when they died, I wanted to die too. The only reason I survived that fire was because Thomas threw me through a window before going back for Samuel. I lived because he chose me over himself, and I've spent every day since wondering if I deserved that choice." Her voice broke. "I can't love like that again, Cole. I can't build something knowing it could all burn down. I can't let myself need someone that much." Cole stood and moved to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence like warmth. "What if it doesn't burn down?" he asked quietly. "What if we build something that lasts?" "Nothing lasts. Not really." "That's not true. Your love for Thomas and Samuel, that lasted. It survived the fire. It survived their deaths. It's still here in the way you honor their memory by refusing to give up, by choosing to keep living even when living hurts." He turned to look at her veiled profile. "That's not weakness, Evelyn. That's the strongest kind of love there is." "And what if I can't love you like that?" The words came out whisper soft. "What if I'm too broken to give you what you deserve?" "Then we'll be broken together," Cole said simply. "And maybe that's enough." Evelyn finally turned to face him, and with shaking hands she reached up and unpinned her veil. She'd done this before, shown her face to the town, to Reeves, to people who needed to understand her scars. But this was different. This was choosing to be seen not as a statement or a weapon, but as herself. The veil fell away, revealing her face in the lamplight, half beautiful, half ravaged, entirely human. "This is what loving me means," she said. "Scars and all, nightmares and grief, and days when I can barely breathe under the weight of what I've lost. Are you sure that's what you want?" Cole reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to refuse, and cupped her scarred cheek in his hand. His thumb traced the ridges of burned tissue with a gentleness that made her throat tight. "I'm sure," he said. "Are you?" Evelyn closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, the first time she'd let anyone touch her scars with tenderness instead of clinical necessity. "I don't know, but I want to be." "That's enough," Cole said. "That's more than enough." He leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers, their breath mingling in the cold air, and Evelyn felt something in her chest crack open, not breaking but blooming, painful and necessary as spring after brutal winter. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "So am I." "What if we're making a mistake?" "Then we'll fix it. Together." Evelyn pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "I need time. I need to know this is real and not just proximity and gratitude and two lonely people clinging to each other." "Take all the time you need," Cole said. "I'm not going anywhere." She believed him. Against all logic and self-protection, she believed him. The next morning, Evelyn woke before dawn as usual, but stayed in bed for an extra moment, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand what had changed. The room looked the same, the house sounded the same, but she felt different, lighter somehow, like she'd been carrying a weight so long she'd forgotten it was there until she set it down. She rose and dressed, pinning her veil in place more out of habit than need, and made her way to the kitchen. Cole was already there, starting the fire in the stove with the awkward determination of a man who'd learned the task but never mastered it. "I can do that," Evelyn said. "I know, but you do everything else around here. Figured I should at least attempt to be useful." He looked up at her, and something in his expression was different too, more open, more hopeful. "Morning." "Morning." They worked side by side preparing breakfast, falling into the easy cooperation they'd developed over weeks. But now there was something else underneath it, something that made every accidental touch feel electric, every glance weighted with possibility. "Cole," Evelyn said as she cracked eggs into a bowl, "about last night." "You don't have to explain, or decide, or—" "I want to try," she interrupted. "That's what I'm saying. I'm still terrified. I still have nightmares about fire and loss. I still wake up some mornings convinced this is all temporary and I'll lose it any moment, but I want to try to build something here. With you. If you'll be patient with me." Cole set down the coffee pot, his hand suddenly unsteady. "Patient? I can do? I've been learning patience from you for months now." "I'm not making any promises about forever," Evelyn warned. "I can't think that far ahead." "Then we'll think about today, and tomorrow, and all the small days that add up to something bigger." He moved closer. "That's how you've been teaching me to live anyway, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of courage at a time." Evelyn reached up and removed her veil without ceremony, setting it aside on the counter. "If we're doing this, I need to stop hiding, at least here, at least with you." Cole's eyes traced her face, both sides of it, scarred and smooth, with an expression that held no pity, only recognition. "You're beautiful." "I'm scarred." "Same thing," Cole said. "Beauty isn't about being unmarked. It's about being real." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes, the first genuine tears of something other than grief in longer than she could remember. "You're going to make me cry into the eggs." "Please don't. I'm bad enough at cooking without adding salt water." She laughed, and it felt like freedom. The ranch hands noticed the shift, though they were too respectful or too smart to comment directly. But Pete Garrett smiled more when he saw them together. Jack stopped looking worried every time Cole spent an extra hour at the house instead of working. The younger hands started asking Evelyn if the boss liked this or that, including her in their understanding of how the ranch worked. Tommy, fully recovered from his heat exhaustion, approached Evelyn one afternoon while she was hanging laundry. "Mrs. Shaw, can I ask you something?" "Of course." The boy shuffled his feet, his face red. The boss, he's different since you came. Happier, I guess. Some of the men are saying, well, they're wondering if maybe what? Evelyn prompted gently. If maybe you're going to stay. For good, I mean. Not just working here, but being here. With him. Evelyn looked at the boy's earnest face and decided honesty was kinder than deflection. I don't know yet, Tommy. We're figuring it out. But you might? I might. Tommy grinned. Good. The boss deserves someone who makes him smile like you do. And you deserve, I don't know, everything good, I guess. After what you've been through. The simple kindness of it made Evelyn's throat tight. Thank you, Tommy. That's very sweet. Just the truth, ma'am. As October deepened toward November, the first snow came, light flurries that dusted the landscape white and made everything look new. Evelyn stood at the kitchen window watching it fall, remembering other snowfalls in other lifetimes. Thomas lifting Samuel up to catch flakes on his tongue, the three of them making snow angels in the yard of their homestead. The memories hurt, but differently now. Less like fresh wounds and more like old scars, permanent but bearable. Cole found her there, lost in thought. First snow, he observed. It's beautiful. Makes everything look clean, like the world's getting a fresh start. Evelyn glanced at him. Is that what we're doing? Starting fresh? I don't think we can start fresh, Cole said thoughtfully. We both carry too much history, but maybe we can start honest. Build something that acknowledges what we've been while reaching for what we could become. That's very philosophical for a rancher. I've had a good teacher. They stood together watching the snow fall, and Evelyn realized this was what she'd been afraid to want. Not grand passion or dramatic declarations, but this quiet companionship. Someone to stand beside while the world transformed itself. Someone who understood that healing wasn't about forgetting, but about learning to carry your scars without letting them define you. Cole, she said quietly, I think I'm falling in love with you. She felt him go still beside her. I think? He repeated. I know. I am. I'm falling in love with you, and it terrifies me, but I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions. She turned to face him fully. I burned once. I lost everything. And I survived it. If I can survive that, maybe I can survive the risk of loving again. Cole pulled her into his arms, and Evelyn let herself be held, fully, without reservation, without the careful distance she'd maintained for so long. I love you too, he said into her hair. I have for weeks, maybe longer. I just didn't know how to say it without making you feel pressured or obligated or… Cole. Yes? Stop talking. She kissed him then, her scarred lips meeting his in a kiss that tasted like coffee and snow, and the tentative promise of something neither of them had dared believe possible. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. So what now? He asked. Now we live, Evelyn said. We work, we build, we love each other as best we can and hope that's enough. And if it's not? Then we try harder. Cole laughed, the sound bright and genuine. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, Evelyn insisted. It's just not easy. But nothing worth having ever is. They spent the rest of the day working side by side, and when evening came, they sat on the porch wrapped in the same blanket, watching the snow continue to fall. The world was cold and white and quiet. But between them was warmth that had nothing to do with fabric and everything to do with two people choosing each other, despite every reason to stay safe and alone. I'm still keeping my wages, Evelyn said suddenly. Cole blinked. What? I'm still working for you, still earning my pay. I'm not going to be dependent or beholden. If I stay, it's because I choose to, not because I have no other options. Fair enough. And I want to visit Sarah Palmer in town regularly. I need friends, a life outside this ranch. Also fair. And someday, not now, but someday, I want to plant roses along the fence line. Real roses, not wild ones. Something beautiful that takes work to maintain. Cole smiled. I'll help you plant them. You don't have to. I want to. Everything beautiful takes work to maintain, Evelyn, including us. She leaned her head on his shoulder, letting herself rest in a way she hadn't since before the fire. Thank you. For what? For being patient, for seeing past the scars, for giving me space to heal while still making it clear you wanted me to stay. Thank you for staying, Cole replied. For choosing life, for choosing me. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell completely. Two people who'd been brought together by cruelty and circumstance, learning that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings led to the most necessary endings. And in the quiet of that Wyoming night, with snow falling soft and steady around them, Evelyn Shaw finally understood what it meant to be home. Winter arrived in earnest the week after their confession, bringing with it the kind of cold that turned breath to fog and made the land seem infinite and unforgiving. But inside Iron Ridge, warmth bloomed in unexpected places. Not just from the fires Evelyn kept burning in every room, but from the quiet revolution happening between two people learning to love after loss. The morning after the first real snowfall, Evelyn woke to find Cole already gone from the house, which was unusual. She dressed quickly, still pinning her veil in place out of habit, though she'd begun to question whether she needed it anymore, at least here on the ranch. When she reached the kitchen, she found a note on the table in Cole's rough handwriting. "Come to the barn when you're ready. Bring coffee. See." Curious, Evelyn prepared a thermos and made her way across the snow-dusted yard. The barn was warm with animal heat and lamplight, and she found Cole in the far corner with Pete Garrett, both men examining something she couldn't quite see. "What's all this?" she asked. Cole turned, his face bright with barely contained excitement. "Close your eyes." "Cole, please, trust me." Evelyn set down the thermos and closed her eyes, allowing Cole to guide her forward by the elbow. She could hear soft rustling, Pete's quiet chuckle, and then Cole's voice close to her ear. "Open them." In the corner stall, nestled in fresh hay, was a nursing mare with a foal that couldn't have been more than a day old. The baby was all legs and enormous eyes, its coat a deep chestnut that would likely lighten with age. "She foaled last night," Cole explained. "I wanted you to be the first to see. I thought you might want to name her." Evelyn's breath caught. She moved closer to the stall, extending her hand slowly. The foal's mother watched her carefully, but didn't object when the baby stumbled forward on unsteady legs to investigate Evelyn's outstretched fingers. "She's perfect," Evelyn whispered. "She's yours," Cole said. "If you want her. A gift. Not because you need one, but because I wanted to give you something that represents a beginning instead of an ending." Evelyn felt tears burn behind her eyes. The last time she'd received a gift had been from Thomas, the Christmas before the fire, a book of poetry she'd had to leave behind when the bank took everything. She'd thought she'd never want to receive anything from anyone again, the weight of obligation and eventual loss too heavy to bear. But this was different. This was Cole understanding that she needed to nurture something fragile and new, something that would grow stronger instead of being consumed by flame. "Hope," Evelyn said suddenly. Cole raised an eyebrow. "What?" "Her name. I want to call her Hope." Pete Garrett made a noise that might have been approval or emotion or both, then quietly excused himself, leaving them alone with the horses. "Hope," Cole repeated, testing the word. "I like it." Evelyn turned to him, removing her veil without thinking about it, needing him to see her face when she said this. "Thank you. Not just for the foal, but for understanding what I needed even when I didn't." "You've been teaching me to pay attention to what matters," Cole said. "Figured it was time I proved I'd learned something." They stood together in the lamplight, watching Hope explore her small world on wobbling legs, and Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. She had something to care for again, something to watch grow. The fear was still there, lurking in the shadows, but so was the courage to face it. Over the following weeks, Evelyn divided her time between the household, her garden planning for spring, and daily visits to the barn to check on Hope. The foal grew stronger each day, more confident, playfully butting her head against Evelyn's shoulder when she arrived with treats. Cole often joined her, the two of them leaning against the stall, watching Hope, with the contentment of people who'd forgotten how to enjoy simple pleasures and were slowly remembering. It was during one of these visits, in mid-December, when the cold had truly set its teeth into Wyoming, that Evelyn finally voiced the question that had been building in her mind. "Cole, What are we doing? He looked over at her, confused. Watching a foal eat hay? No, I mean, what are we? To each other? We live together, we love each other, but I'm still technically your employee. I still sleep in the guest room. We haven't told anyone in town that anything has changed between us. What are we? Cole was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. What do you want us to be? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Evelyn, I would marry you tomorrow if you'd have me, but I also know you need time. You need space to figure out who you are outside of being someone's wife, someone's employee, someone's tragedy. So I'm waiting for you to decide what you want, not what you think you should want. The honesty of it was both comforting and terrifying. What if I don't know what I want? Then we keep living the way we are until you do. I'm not going to pressure you into anything. You've had enough of people making choices for you. Evelyn reached over and took his hand, threading her scarred fingers through his work-roughened ones. I want to feel like I have agency in my own life again, like I'm choosing my future instead of just surviving whatever happens to me. You are, Cole said firmly. Every day you choose to be here, you're choosing your future. Every time you tend that garden or care for hope or sit with me on the porch, you're building the life you want. Don't mistake the absence of grand declarations for the absence of choice. When did you become so wise? I had a good teacher who showed me that strength looks like gentleness, and courage looks like showing up every day even when it hurts. Evelyn leaned her head against his shoulder, watching Hope settle down in the hay for a nap. I think I want to stop wearing the veil. Everywhere, not just here. I'm tired of hiding from a world that already knows what I look like. That's a big step. I know. But Sarah's been encouraging me. She says I'll never know if people can accept me until I give them the chance. Evelyn paused. Will you come with me? To town? The first time I go without it? Anywhere you want to go, Cole promised. Always. The following Sunday, they rode into Black Hollow together for church services. Evelyn had debated the wisdom of starting with church, the most public, most judgmental venue, but had finally decided that if she was going to do this, she should do it in a place where people supposedly practiced charity and compassion. The reality, she knew, would likely be more complicated. She wore her best dress, one she'd sewn herself from fabric Sarah had brought, a deep green that brought out the color in her eyes. Her hair, which had grown enough to look intentionally short rather than damaged, was brushed and pinned simply. And her face was bare, scars visible in the winter sunlight, her partial ear uncovered. When they entered the church, conversation stopped like someone had slammed a door. Every head turned. Evelyn felt Cole tense beside her, ready to defend her if necessary, but she put a gentle hand on his arm. It's all right, she murmured. Let them look. Sarah Palmer was the first to move, rising from her pew with a broad smile. Evelyn, Cole, come sit with us. There's plenty of room. The doctor and his wife made space, and slowly, like ice thawing, the congregation returned to their conversations. There were still stares. Evelyn could feel them like physical touches. But there was also something else. Respect, maybe? Or at least the beginning of understanding. Reverend Matthews delivered his sermon on grace and second chances, and whether he'd planned the topic or chosen it specifically for today, Evelyn couldn't tell. But the message landed nonetheless. When services ended, several women approached her, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Mrs. Shaw, your dress is beautiful. Did you make it yourself? I heard you've been working wonders with the garden at Iron Ridge. My son works for Mr. Bennett. He says you're the best cook in the territory. Small talk, surface pleasantries, but underneath was acceptance. These women weren't looking away from her scars or pretending they didn't exist. They were looking past them to see the person beneath. Dalton Reeves appeared as they were leaving, his hat in his hands, his expression uncomfortable. Mrs. Shaw. Mr. Bennett. Cole's jaw tightened, but Evelyn spoke first. Mr. Reeves. I wanted to say, that is, I've been thinking about what you said, about being better than my worst moments. He shifted his weight awkwardly. I talked to the territorial office. Told them the dam was my mistake, that Bennett had every right to the water. I wanted you both to know there won't be any more trouble from me. Evelyn studied him, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but found only genuine discomfort and what might have been the beginning of shame. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. That takes courage." "Not as much as what you did showing your face after—" He stopped, realizing how the sentence sounded. "I mean, coming back to town after what happened at the auction, that took real strength." "We're all capable of strength," Evelyn said. "We're also all capable of cruelty. The choice between them is what defines us." Reeves nodded, replaced his hat, and walked away looking like a man who'd been given something to think about. "That was generous of you," Cole observed as they climbed into the wagon. "That was honest," Evelyn corrected. "I meant what I said to him months ago. If I can choose mercy after losing everything, anyone can." On the ride back to Iron Ridge, Evelyn felt lighter than she had in months. The fear of judgment that had kept her veiled for so long had lost its power. People had seen her, really seen her, and the world hadn't ended. Some had stared, some had looked away, but many had simply accepted her as she was, scars and all. "How do you feel?" Cole asked. "Free," Evelyn said, and meant it. Winter deepened through December and into January, bringing storms that kept them close to the house for days at a time. Evelyn used the time to sew new clothes for herself, not just black morning wear, but colors, blues and greens, and even a deep burgundy that made her feel bold and alive. She also began teaching some of the younger ranch hands to read in the evenings using the books Sarah had brought and others Cole had ordered from Denver. Tommy was her most enthusiastic student, absorbing knowledge like parched earth soaking up rain. Pete Garrett, who'd revealed he couldn't read beyond basic signs and labels, joined the lessons with gruff embarrassment that melted into genuine engagement. "Never thought I'd learn my letters at 52, he admitted one evening. "But you make it seem like it's never too late." "It's never too late to become who you're capable of being," Evelyn said. "That's the whole point." Cole watched these lessons from the doorway sometimes, struck by how naturally Evelyn had transformed his house into a home and his isolated ranch into a community. She hadn't just survived, she'd created life around her, pulling people into her orbit and making them better for the proximity. In late January, a letter arrived from the territorial office, formal notification that Dalton Reeves had withdrawn his complaint against Cole's water usage and had paid a fine for his illegal dam. The matter was closed. Cole found Evelyn in the kitchen, preparing bread dough with the methodical precision that meant she was working through something difficult in her mind. "Good news," he said, showing her the letter. "It's finally over." Evelyn read it, then smiled. "Good. That's one less thing to worry about." "You've got something else on your mind," Cole observed. "I can tell." She shaped the dough into loaves before answering. "I've been thinking about Samuel, my son." Cole went very still. Evelyn rarely spoke about her child, the pain still too raw to examine directly. "He would have been 5 in March," she continued, her hands working the dough with steady rhythm. "I've been wondering if I should do something to mark it. Not a funeral. We did that months ago. But something to acknowledge that he lived, that he mattered." "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know. Something growing, maybe? A tree? So there's something alive in the world that honors his memory?" Cole moved closer, placing his hands over hers, stilling their motion. "We could plant it together. In the spring, when the ground thaws. An apple tree, maybe? Something that will bear fruit and provide shade and outlast both of us." Evelyn looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You'd do that? Even though he wasn't your son?" "He was yours, which makes him matter to me. And more than that, any child deserves to be remembered. Deserves to have left a mark on the world that says he was here, he was loved." This time Evelyn let the tears fall, leaning into Cole's embrace while her shoulders shook with grief that was finally beginning to heal around the edges. Cole held her through it, offering no empty platitudes or false comfort, just his steady presence and the promise that she didn't have to carry her pain alone anymore. "Thank you," she whispered when she could speak again, "for not being afraid of my grief." "Your grief is part of you," Cole said simply. "I love all of you, not just the parts that are easy." February brought the first hints of coming spring, days when the sun felt almost warm, nights when the wind lost some of its bite. Evelyn began planning her garden in earnest, sketching layouts and ordering seeds from catalogs Cole had brought from town. Hope had grown from a wobbling foal into a confident young horse, following Evelyn around the paddock like a devoted puppy. It was during one of these early spring afternoons, with Evelyn working in the barn and Cole repairing tack nearby, that she finally said what had been building for weeks. "I want to marry you." Cole nearly dropped the bridle he was holding. "What?" "I want to marry you," Evelyn repeated, turning to face him fully. "Not because I need to, not because it's expected, but because I choose to. Because I love you and I want to build a life with you that's intentional and chosen, not just something that happened to us." Cole set down his work carefully, as if sudden movements might break the moment. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything. I spent months being afraid that loving you meant betraying Thomas's memory, but I finally understand that honoring his love means choosing life, choosing joy, choosing to build something beautiful even after everything burned." She moved closer. "You've been patient with me, Cole. You've given me space to heal and time to choose. And I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us." Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough that she could feel his heart racing against her chest. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." "We should do it soon," Evelyn said. "I don't want a big ceremony or a spectacle, just us and witnesses and vows that mean something." "Whatever you want," Cole promised. "However you want it." They were married 3 weeks later in the same church where Evelyn had first revealed her face to the congregation. Sarah Palmer stood as her witness, Pete Garrett as Cole's. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony with genuine warmth, speaking about love that emerges from ashes and how the most beautiful things are often forged in fire. Evelyn wore the burgundy dress she'd made, her face bare, her scarred hands steady as they held Cole's. When Reverend Matthews asked if she took this man to be her husband, she answered with a voice that carried through the small church. "I do. I choose him freely and completely, with full knowledge of what I'm promising and full faith in who we can become together." Cole's own vows were simpler but no less powerful. "I promise to honor your strength, respect your choices, and love you through whatever comes, not in spite of what you've survived, but including it. You've taught me what it means to be truly alive, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that gift." When they kissed to seal their vows, the small gathering of townspeople and ranch hands erupted in applause. Tommy whistled so loud that Sarah Palmer had to shush him, though she was smiling. The celebration afterward was held at Iron Ridge, with tables set up in the yard despite the lingering chill. Evelyn had cooked for days, preparing enough food to feed twice the guests they'd invited. The ranch hands had decorated the barn with wildflowers they'd somehow found blooming early in sheltered spots. Someone produced a fiddle, and dancing began as the sun set over the plains. Dalton Reeves appeared late in the evening, standing awkwardly at the edge of the celebration, until Cole noticed him and walked over. "Didn't expect to see you here," Cole said, though his tone held no hostility. "I know I wasn't invited, but I wanted to bring you something, a wedding gift, I guess." Reeves handed Cole an envelope. "Deed to the land between our properties. The 40 acres I've been fighting you over for years. I'm signing it over to you, free and clear. Consider it an apology for everything." Cole stared at the envelope, genuinely shocked. "Reeves, this is worth—" "I know what it's worth. I also know I've been a son of a bitch for years. And watching you two, watching how you took something terrible and made it into something good, it made me realize I don't want to be that man anymore." He shifted uncomfortably. "Your wife was right. We're all capable of better. Figured it was time I proved it." Cole extended his hand, and after a moment, Reeves shook it. "Thank you," Cole said. "For this, and for having the courage to change. Thank your wife. She's the one who showed me it was possible." Reeves left without joining the celebration, but his gesture had transformed the evening into something even more significant, proof that redemption was possible for anyone willing to do the work. As night fell and the celebration wound down, Cole and Evelyn stood on the porch of their home, no longer his house, but theirs, watching the last guest depart. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Bennett?" Cole asked, testing out her new name. Evelyn smiled. "Strange, happy, terrified, complete, all of it at once." Any regrets? None. You? Only that I wasted so many years being alone when I could have been looking for you. You couldn't have found me before now, Evelyn said wisely. I wasn't ready to be found. We both had to become who we needed to be before we could become who we are together. They went inside as the temperature dropped, banking the fires and checking that everything was secure for the night. But instead of going to separate rooms as they had for months, they climbed the stairs together, Evelyn's hand in Cole's, moving toward the future they'd chosen. Spring arrived in earnest in late March, painting the Wyoming plains in shades of green and gold. True to his word, Cole helped Evelyn plant Samuel's tree, a young apple sapling they placed in the garden where it would receive morning sun and afternoon shade. Evelyn spoke to her son as they worked the soil, telling him about her new life, about Cole, about how much she still loved him and always would. He would have liked you, she told Cole when they'd finished. Thomas, too. They both would have approved of how you've cared for me. I hope I'm worthy of that approval, Cole said. You are, Evelyn assured him. Every day you are. The garden flourished under Evelyn's care, producing vegetables that fed the ranch through summer and into autumn. Hope grew into a beautiful young mare, gentle and responsive, who seemed to understand that she belonged to Evelyn in some fundamental way. The ranch itself prospered, the combination of Cole's business sense and Evelyn's practical wisdom creating an operation that was both profitable and humane. But more than any of that, Iron Ridge became what it had never been before. A home. Not just a structure or a business, but a place where people belonged, where they were cared for, where they could be fully themselves without fear of judgment or abandonment. Evelyn continued her reading lessons through the summer, expanding them to include ranch hands from neighboring properties who'd heard about the opportunity. Sarah Palmer became a regular visitor, often staying for dinner and long conversations about books and life and the small rebellions available to women in Wyoming territory. Even Reverend Matthews started attending some of the lessons, claiming he wanted to better understand his congregation's needs, but really just enjoying the community Evelyn had created. In late September, as the first hints of autumn crept across the land, Evelyn and Cole stood at the fence line where she'd once said she wanted to plant roses. The garden had given them cuttings, and together they'd prepared the ground, mixing in compost and good soil. Are you sure you want to do this? Cole asked as they knelt in the dirt. Roses are difficult. They might not survive the winter. Everything worth having requires risk, Evelyn said, carefully placing the first cutting in the ground. Besides, I'm tired of only planting things that are guaranteed to survive. Sometimes you have to plant beauty just because it's beautiful, even if it's fragile. They worked in comfortable silence, planting a dozen rose cuttings along the fence. Some would die. That was inevitable. But some would thrive, would bloom, would prove that beauty could exist even in harsh conditions if you were willing to nurture it. As they finished, the sun setting behind them in shades of orange and pink, Evelyn sat back on her heels and looked at what they'd created together. The garden bursting with late-season vegetables, Samuel's apple tree, already showing signs of healthy growth, the rose cuttings that would either flourish or fail but represented hope either way, the house behind them, warm with lamplight and life. Do you ever miss it? Cole asked suddenly. Your old life, before the fire. Evelyn considered the question carefully. I miss them. Thomas and Samuel. I'll always miss them. But the life we had, it was beautiful, but it was also fragile. We were building something on hope and hard work, but we never acknowledged how easily it could all fall apart. She turned to face him. What we're building here is different. It acknowledges the fragility. It honors the scars. It doesn't pretend that tragedy can't strike, but it chooses to build anyway. That feels more honest somehow, more real. More earned, Cole suggested. Yes, exactly that. They walked back to the house hand in hand as darkness fell, and Evelyn realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd had a nightmare about fire. The dreams still came occasionally, but they'd lost their power to destroy her. She'd learned that surviving tragedy didn't mean forgetting it. It meant carrying it as part of your story while still writing new chapters. That night, lying beside Cole in the bed they now shared, Evelyn spoke into the darkness. I'm happy. Is that allowed? To be happy after losing so much? Cole's arm tightened around her. It's not just allowed. It's necessary. Happiness doesn't dishonor grief, Evelyn. It proves that grief didn't win. Thomas would have wanted this for me. A good life, a good man, a future. I'm sure he would. And Samuel, her voice broke slightly. Samuel would have loved the ranch, the horses, the wide open spaces, all of it. We'll tell him about it, Cole said. Every spring when we tend his tree, we'll tell him about the life his mother built from the ashes he left behind. Evelyn turned in his arms, pressing her face against his chest, letting herself be held through the wave of grief that still came sometimes, unpredictable as Wyoming weather. But this time the grief was accompanied by gratitude for what she'd had, for what she'd lost, and for what she'd found in the aftermath. Winter returned, as it always did, bringing snow and cold and long nights. But this winter was different from the last. This winter, Evelyn sat by the fire with her husband, teaching ranch hands to read, planning next year's garden, dreaming about the future instead of hiding from the past. On Christmas Eve, Cole presented her with a leather-bound journal and a pen. I thought you might want to write things down, he explained. Your story, Samuel's story, our story. Not because anyone else needs to read it, but because it deserves to be remembered. Evelyn opened the journal to the first blank page, running her scarred fingers across the smooth paper. What should I write? Whatever feels true, Cole said. So Evelyn began to write. She wrote about Thomas and Samuel preserving their memories in ink and paper. She wrote about the fire and the loss and the terrible months that followed. She wrote about an auction and a bet, and a man who'd made a terrible mistake and then spent months trying to become worthy of forgiveness. She wrote about gardens and roses and a foal named Hope, about ranch hands learning to read and enemies becoming neighbors, about choosing life after death, love after loss, future after fire. And on the final page of that first journal, months later when spring returned and Samuel's apple tree bloomed for the first time, she wrote, My name is Evelyn Shaw Bennett. I am a widow and a wife, a survivor and a gardener, a woman who was burned but refused to become ash. I have scars that map tragedy across my skin, and I wear them without shame. I have loved and lost and learned to love again. I have built a life from the ruins of another life, and I have learned that beauty often grows in the spaces between survival and surrender. This is my story. This is my truth. This is my life, chosen and claimed and fully lived. She closed the journal and looked out the window at Iron Ridge, at the garden preparing to wake from winter sleep, at the horses grazing in distant pastures, at the roses along the fence that had not just survived but thrived, their thorns a reminder that beautiful things are often protected by what makes them dangerous. Cole came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked. How far we've come, how much we've built, how impossible this all seemed a year ago. And now? Now it seems inevitable. Like this was always where we were heading, we just had to survive everything else to get here. Cole kissed her temple, careful and tender as always with her scars. I love you, Evelyn Bennett. I love you too, Cole Bennett. Thank you for buying me at that auction. He laughed, startled. That's the first time you've thanked me for that. Oh, well, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me at the time, Evelyn said. But it led to this. To us. To a life worth living instead of just surviving. So yes, in retrospect, thank you for being prideful and stupid enough to make that bet. Thank you for being humble enough to try to fix it. And thank you for being patient enough to let me heal at my own pace. Thank you for giving me the chance to become better than I was, Cole replied. For teaching me that strength and gentleness aren't opposites, and that the bravest thing anyone can do is choose to keep living when everything in them wants to surrender. They stood together at the window as afternoon faded into evening, two people who'd been broken by their separate tragedies and rebuilt by their shared determination to create something beautiful from the wreckage. Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered across the plains, carrying with it the promise of spring and growth and all the small miracles that happen when people choose hope over despair, love over fear, and life over the seductive darkness of giving up. The roses would bloom soon, bright against the fence line, beautiful and thorned and stubbornly alive despite every reason to wither, just like the woman who'd planted them, just like the life she'd chosen to build. And in the garden, Samuel's apple tree stood sentinel, its branches reaching toward a sky that held both memory and promise, bearing witness to the truth that love never truly dies. It just transforms into different kinds of beauty, different ways of blooming, different reasons to believe that spring always follows winter for those brave enough to endure the cold. This was home. This was family. This was the life Evelyn Shaw Bennett had chosen, had fought for, had earned through fire and grief and the stubborn refusal to let tragedy have the final word. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.